teni so terang rikpa teni chusokona la yongne teni ngaso samba nyam denzum ni chuchusha ki teni gorkup yakbo yongwala teni ngarang pe meba gapto chimbo shonsong.
Good evening. I'm extremely grateful this evening to have this opportunity to be here at the Rigpa Center, have this opportunity to give a teaching.
Tani Rigpa Chutsukzina Sogyal Rinpoche tani Zambalanga Sasha Susola Tsokpa tani Mambo tani Zengduk tani Mem Mambo la tani Nangchu Ngochu Chiada tani Gum Nyamling Chiada Tsoko Tola Tsangmaga The
Rigpa Center, or there are Rigpa centers in many places over the world, and Rigpa has and does a great job in introducing Buddhism to people, and not just introducing Buddhism but also meditation methods, etc. And I'm extremely glad. I have great admiration and I rejoice in the work that Rigpa does.
Tani terang atso tani 참말라 갑답시야가 나온돈디 강레지나 되는 가서 디릅 니셔 짝직 바가 되니 추 강지접고 그래지기 다 된디스 그 돈에 내가 저 갑답시야래.
And the topic for this evening's conversation is how to go about being a Buddhist, or how to go about practicing Buddhism in the 21st century.
tani 디릅 니시 짝직 바제한데 쇼치닝 가츠 tani 로아 미르라 야르기페 망보트니 페양보송노사 딘지다 양 쇼치니샤나 양 가츠 슈소코토라요 뇨자 할레바 망보 가라와 망보 숑와 딘지 디릅 스크리스.
So the 21st century is a time, on the one hand, of great progress and material development. On the other hand, it's also a time of many challenges and conflicts.
Tani ngarancho dirib jogit jirgo nyeshin de sogonala mambo gotini shigyab tani kavle mambo jam baba mambo shini ngubo yargi tambare tani ngubo tartape yargi yabotani songdugsi.
Over the past several centuries, the 18th, 19th, 20th centuries, many people have expended a lot of effort in terms of material development, and the result is that we have achieved material progress.
Tani ngama yena ngarancho tsama gatani rewa ngubo de la tani pe rewa chimbo jabre ngacho ngubo yona ngubo mambo yona tani tsama la demo chipo yongre ngubo mambo yo sona de ngacho la jamba mambo go mare samne mambo gatindi tani samlo tani tangwares.
During this time, many people have placed great hopes on material things, placed great hope on material things and their ability to bring us happiness.
The now Dangacho Tirpnish Zachipa, Tenjigana Latin, Lep Sarvijis, Tenita Motso, Ta Sargo, Nacho Hagoyore, or Dangacho Mubote, Shetan Goda Gore, Nacho Mena, Tenatsun Sone Shitakumare. Rite yena teni ta ngarancho ngupo chipo ta ngarancho teni mo teni net natun tamchipo tachu shingona tachu shin tamkum mandu sambata teni ngarancho ta hago yore.
However, now in the 21st century, many people have come to the awareness that material things alone are not able to solve all of our problems. So whilst we do need the material things in order to support our survival, our physical existence, in actual fact, the awareness that material things are not everything is one that is newly percolating.
Tani ta nga so ngubo chibo tani tondak sama tachishi matabna ta kandi gogorezina tani zambalang ka tola lo tongcha ni ta yangon tani lo tongcha chig tani nani ta chulug mambo tani shongyore te to samche po tani mo chigni mo gonsho yabochi ya ta ni tani mo tani samlo tongde tani na ton tachishi tani tondak la shongbares.
So, in respective of what we might need beyond the material realms, we have traditions, religious traditions that go back thousands of years, 1,000 years, 2,000 years, 3,000 of years. And the contributions of these religious traditions have been primarily to improving the ethical and moral conduct of humans and contributing to the development of their ideas and thought.
Tani nga so sem gatola ta nga so ngubo yargi mambo song tindishiyo na darong nga so sem gatola ndochayo sem gatola jerdangyo kongchoyo tani nga so sem gatola darong pena charik pe yargi sone nga so mocho shisha mambo ngama latana nga darong nga so ngama mashiba mambo shigiyore rite yena darong nga so zawi tone darong nga so tani 다 마르바 나초라 요레 제당 요레 공조 요레 뇽몽바 요레 데니 데소 요티 도착 제당 뜸그레 데소 요 차티 데니 뇽몽바 잠바 mambo양 다른 나초라 요레.
So despite the fact that we now have an unprecedented material affluence, and despite the fact that we know more about so many things, know more than we ever have, nevertheless, we still have the basic afflictions of attachment, desire, hatred, anger, and ignorance.
Tani natun teso tamche podeni da tachushi gona tani chuluk teso soso nangla tani soso go tela natun tachushi lik tapsir mambo shakayore soso la chuluk ganda gana koso la soso go tani kyachu tani koranso go tani guba 요리데 있나다 가서 남바가 때랑 가서 샤바티 되니 남바가 되니 차추제고 난다 남바가 탑시티 샤그레스.
So in respect of dealing with these negative emotions or negative situations, different religious traditions have their own characteristics, they have their own ways of explaining things and resolving these situations. However, tonight we're going to be speaking primarily from the perspective of the Buddhist tradition.
Teni terang ngaso ndala yongken chupa tsangma teni ngaso teni shokchini chupa res shoknini teni ngaso tsangma dirabni sha tsakchik bagandala ki yongken chowa gerke yongken teni ge ma tagdagre teni indi teni ngaso dirabni sha tsakchik ban di nangla ngarang chogo chukadi susu kandi nyamseleng gogore teni ngaso shitsoko thola teni phamba kandi drib gogore ti thola teni ngaso terang kabda shigres.
So this evening, everybody in the audience has two things in common. They are Buddhist practitioners on the one hand, and on the other hand, they are people born in the 21st century. So it's for this reason that tonight we're going to be talking about how to go about practicing in the 21st century and how to go about bringing benefit to society.
Teni terang ngaso dirimni shi tsakchik baga teni chubazi inna Then Aransola Tawa Kanti Gores, then Aranso Shobat Kanti Gores, then Aranso Gombat Kanti Gores, Tawazina Maso, then in Jifting Kam, Soso Setok, the Solangaso Munzen Kanti go, Soso Tasser, or take Kanti Gores. Then you Gombazina, then in Aso the Tasser, the Yabuzo Yotani, then Soso Yamlin Kanti go, the La Gomba Secrecy. Then in Aso the Tawa, Gomba Nipo, the Yotsana, then in Aranso Shopati. Teni mujanla teni pantoya ta teni legore teni tif shoba ta kan legore zine gari so gore so so ta kan gore zine teni ngaso ngi terang tondak sam go tone chamala khadda jegyense.
So as Buddhist practitioners in the 21st century, tonight I'd like to speak in terms of three things: the view, that contemporary practitioners need to develop their meditation practice and also their conduct. So the first view refers to our holding or developing correct ideas related to the world, as it were, to one's practice. Second, meditation, what kind of practice should we be engaging in? And then thirdly, as a result of our practice, how should we be benefiting society through our behavior? So it's in relation to these three things, view, practice, and conduct, that I will be speaking tonight.
Teni ngacho gum nyamnim shinkin zi inna tangbo ngacho la tawa yakbo yogo rezi ngacho tawa manurwa manchurwa teni zi yogo rezi tawa te pena ngacho muk tawa rezi ngacho pena lamlang landro na tangbo muk teni lamka la tago re teni ngacho ye landro go yo landro go yarandro go marandro go kandro go ngacho muk tago rezi te tawa te ngacho muk tawa rezi.
So to start with, as Buddhist practitioners, it's important that we have or we develop a correct view. So when we talk of view, a view is something that we see with our eyes. It's like when we start off on a journey or start off on a path, it's necessary for us to ascertain where we're going so that we don't veer off to the left or right.
Teni tawa te yo tsarna, teni ta jini ngacho gomba yo go re. Gomba te pena ngacho gomba jamni nroa tawa re. Ngacho pena mukta ta ye landro go yo landro go te ta tsarwi jini teni ngacho kamba jamni ye landro go na ye landro yo landro go na yo landro teni nro go re. Mato ngacho namyang mukta teni tane o ye landro go yo landro go zi mukta ne teni kamba mangina kamba teni gachyo mashina ya ngacho nro go sa te la lep tab go mare teni yendi teni tawa jila teni gomba to go res.
And after we've developed our view or fixed our view, it's necessary for us to engage in meditation, engage in practice. This can be likened to actually walking along the path that we have set for ourselves with our eyes. Just simply fixing our eyes on the road ahead of us, saying, oh, I need to go to the left, I need to go to the right, with actually not moving our legs won't get us very far. So the second stage is actual practice.
Teni tawa ta gomba ti ni yo tsarti teni ngacho la te dang nyamdo teni ngacho shopa machik teni shawa leka kare lego to so la shopa zegre korang leka te la shopa zegre teni ngacho tawa te yakpo yo teni gomba te yakpo yo na teni shopa te yakpo yo gres.
And then the third step or the third stage is our practice, our action. So having established our view, having practiced well, what should we go about doing? What sort of action should we undertake? If we have a solid foundation in our view and practice, then this will also result in good results for our conduct.
Pena ngaso tawata gomba shopazeyate ngaso chunyamlenchina chupa chola yang yoris. Le chupa chupo mare jamba leka jamba tsamala teni tawata gombata shopati tsamala yoris. Ngaso pena shawa yakbozle na yang tawa yori gomba yori shopa yori. Teni shawa dikchakchile na yang korang tawa teni korang gomba korang shopa to tsama yoris.
It's not just in respect to religious practice that we can speak of having this threefold formula of a view, practice, and conduct or action. In fact, any kind of work or any kind of thing that we undertake also has a view, practice, and a conduct that underpin it. And not just positive actions, but also negative actions have their own view, practice, and conduct.
Teni tawata gombada shopa to shinchilokba da digbu digjakte kan rizrezina pena kama jam kan mozina teni korang ka tawate kan rezina korang ka sosorang ka leka ya pumale sosorang ka teni chungjap jeta ngarsur shia ta teni moshi lojong moshi ni teni mo jamba ga o teni ngubo mo jamba ga gormo o teso korang soni kama jam ni teni hkeje yangnam choje o teni she go resam teni she na rigre samne teni samdeate teni korang kemazgina korang ka tawares.
So if we're going to talk about the view, practice and action of a thief, for example, the view would be the decision that one is not going to work, one's not going to do business, instead one's going to steal from other people, and this recognition or the acceptance of this view is the view of a thief, we could say.
Teni kumazina, teni kumajam kumazina, teni korang ko gombata kangrezina, teni korang nyama takbar, teni korang ko semnangla, tangi kandiji ni kumajab go, kandiji ni teni chok go, kandiji ni ker go, kandiji na teni gorm, kandiji kena gormo mopo kerjera sare samni takbar nyama takbar sem kanangla, nyengker nyemmo inandra, sammo inandra, korang ko namjin sem kanangla teni samlo mambo tangde gre, te teni korang ko gombaresi, kumazina korang la gombar yore, gombaresi.
And the meditation of a thief would be thinking constantly, time and time, every day, how I'm going to go about thieving and pillaging from other people, how I'm going to go about taking their things. The constant thinking and contemplation of this would be the meditation of a thief.
Teni shopati kangrezina, teni kumayina, teni korang drone, teni ngus lakpa jamba ngubo leni korang karam la chiganda authenticity teni shopasi gres.
And then the action or conduct of a thief would be the actual going and stealing of the property of others.
Teni ngacho tarta, teni tawa dugjak, gomba dugjak, shinsho shopa dugjak to par pangne, teso par mebashi ni, teni ngacho tawa yakpo, teni gomba yakpo, shopa yakpo, tela ngacho lojong she gores.
So what we need to do is abandon or relinquish incorrect views, meditation and practice, and instead cultivate positive view, practice and conduct.
Teni ngacho tawa ga thoni shena parol to shimba trigze ngacho shetang nangba ga jungo nala parol to shimba trigze ni teni shake yore. Di nangni tawa ga wonto shina teni ngacho shirp te hale pa karchim bores.
So in respect of view, we often talk about the 6 perfections or the 6 parameters, and of these, the parameter of wisdom is extremely important in respect of view.
Shetang teni ngacho tawa shirp zia te gore, namina gore, rete ta ngacho tirib nishi chachik pandi nala tele kyang gore zi teni mutsangma ga teni samlo mambo tongo yore, teni ngacho chanrik ka teni shivsha yargib teni halipa mambo droyore, in ti kapse teni ngacho nangba ga yang teni shirp te halipa ga teni karchimbola jak gores.
So whilst the perfection of wisdom is extremely important in itself at any time, particularly now in the 21st century, a time when people really have a lot of thoughts, they do a lot of thinking, science is very advanced, etc. It's particularly important that we cultivate wisdom in this age.
Teni ti nangla ngacho shirp te karchimbo yindi, teni ngacho teni shu nangla mungtat teni mungba goni tapashia, teni ta jimsun me pa toni tapashia yichishia janda oto te yakbo yomari te par teni pang gore, ngacho chula yichishi gore, rete yichishi gona yichishia thomar yichi mapshi pi gongde, teni ngacho lojong mambo shene, o ta te rendung drundug samdi, teni ta zo yichishi na te yakbo yores.
So given that wisdom is so important, it's very necessary that we have a belief that is not grounded in blind faith or blind acceptance. We should develop a belief or a faith that is grounded in study of the teachings and an acceptance that is based on our own examination of them.
Tani nga tsu thomar terang nge shayati nangla nga tsu tawa nga nangla kanti shaki yinzina nga tsu nangba ga tani zhung, nangba ga chu, tani tsatang damba, tani yang takba, tani zigi na tani kanti zigla tani yang takba zegaresi, kanti zigla tani shirab zegaresi, tani kanti zigla yang takba mayimba zegare, kanti zigla mongtat zegare, tengi tani shaki yinzi, mongba ga tapa zina tani nga tsu jimtsin mipi tapa tila zegare, tani shirab ka tapa zete, mongtat mayimba te shirab ka tapa zeyate, tani kanti zigla zegare, nge thomar te motu shiga yinzi.
So what I'd first like to talk about tonight is the difference between faith that is grounded in wisdom and a blind faith, or a faith that is grounded in blind acceptance of the teaching. So it's this distinction that I'd like to first talk about this evening.
Teni nga tso nangpa zhong pecha aya zhongluk teni satang damba teni ziyena teni khorang la chaking sim changgo rezi chaking sim de changna teni nga tso zhong yang tak ba rezi nga tso kileng rezi teni chaking sim de ma changna teni nga tso yang tak ba marezi ni teni nga tso parja kare kileng mari ichi che marezi chaking sim de changna nga tso ichi che chok rezi chaking sim de ma changna teni nga tso ichi che chok marezi.
So in terms of the Buddhist teachings, there are three bases or three criteria that need to be satisfied in order for the teaching to be considered reasonable or in accordance with reason. And if the teachings meet these criteria, then they can be accepted, but if they don't, then they can be discarded.
대 요다 메데 하마고 나양 아주 답하시데나 대 김선 미비 답하세 그래들라 몽뜻라고 그래지 되니 아주 당봉 아주 삼로 망보 당 로종시 딱시시니 차kin선보도 요바다 약보 시니 되니 아주 답하시나 되니 답바다 양 답바래지 데라더니 시럽 그 답하세 그래 마도 몽비 답하세 그 말이지.
So if to start with, we don't understand these three conditions or these three criterion, and our belief is not based in them, then this is a blind faith or a blind belief we have in the teachings. However, if we know about these criteria and our belief is founded in the study and examination and reflection of the teachings, then we can consider our faith to be based in reason, to be based in wisdom.
Teni chakin sambote kangrezena ngacho nangba jungchi na tinala koranga gari shekrezena ko nangba jungti nala shayo pi dondak tela teni donchen manrawa sim teni yena chokoreze ngacho nangba jungchi nala koya koranga shapa tela teni dondak manrawa sim shakayores.
And there is a Buddhist scripture that speaks of these three kinds of reasoning, or speaks of there being three different kinds of reasoning.
Teni dondak tambote kangrezena teni ngacho monsimze gresi monsimzena teni pena ngacho mukun tanan tongji yoya lakpa garak narakpa yoya teni nawa nyanna nyantapa ngana cho mu nawa na chi teso ragna raktapa tana tatapa deso samala teni da monsimze gre te ngacho namgin ngacho gon sowa nala yopa zigda jada 양나 배나가 저거더니 녀마당 다와당 karmata 사고라다 뜻을 로지 뜻술라지 그래 뜻술라 맞죠 무슨 거 예르지 그래스.
The first realm that is spoken of is that of direct perception. So those things that are able to be directly be perceived with our senses, our sense faculties, our eyes, our ears, etc. External objects in the phenomenal world, the stars, the sun, the moon, etc. So the first is the realm of direct perception.
Tani te tondak tamboresi, tani tondak nipate yang nangba nangla shayo pitini ton di nangdun kashi-sigla karisi-gazana tani kokjirisi-garisi. kokjirisi-na ngaso mukatana tatabka marisi. 나와가 년나야 가서 년탑 그 말이 옛날 가서 르바고니 지석박나 지확시나 되니 르바가 통네 되니 지확시 타야가 되니 그 돈닥들이지.
And the second realm is that of things that are hidden or concealed or obscured, things that we are not able to perceive with our eyes and things that are not able to be heard with our ears. However, phenomena belonging to this realm are able to be deduced through processes of inference.
대간다즈리즈나 빼장나 가서 타랑볼라 되니 더와 용구요나시 되니 타랑볼라 더와 망보 용구요나 되니 가서 먹었다나 더와 용화된 가서 통거래스 옛날 띠고라 더와 고라 메 요다 메팅 가서 먹었다나 따뜻고 말이 양랑보리 가서 따뜻고 말이지 대 따뜻 그 말이다 이나 디캅스 가서 더와 용건도 다 더와 용나다 매요래 예전에 대 가서 된 닥주시 그래서 디캅스 더와 용야 돼 가서 원심래 가서 그 따뜻 무슨 통거요래 매이 때때니 더 당가서 르크요 말이 니크르크요 말다 이나 가서 바 지확시니 바 르바가 지확시니 다 더와 용나 더니다 매요래 예전에 가서 된 그 닥주시 그래서 든지 그 거들라 Then kokjerze grezi, koktekerwa, ngaso ngusum mayamba kokjerze grezi.
So an example of this would be when we see smoke rising on the horizon. The smoke rising on the horizon is something that we see through direct perception, but we can't see the fire beneath it that's producing the smoke. However, based on the fact that there is smoke, we are able to, by using processes of inference, it's possible for us to deduce that, in fact, there is fire there. So this is what we talk about. This is what we mean when we talk about objects that are hidden or concealed.
Then somebody 강레즈나 하정 꼭절제 그래서 가서 추운나라 신도 꼭절제 그래서 신도 꼭절제나 당가서 먹었다나야 따탑고 말해. Then 가서 그 지확시나 르바가 지확시나 지확시 탑고 말해. 따탑고 말해. 옛날한테니 당가서 배나 상기가 송라보 든지즈라 예치시니 어다 인사레지 때 요사레지니 든지가 상로 땅야 마토 방아랑 좀 먹었다 마토. then 알아서 지확시나 지확시 마토. 든지거든이 다 거치기 든지 거치기어래 된디 데라 신도 거치르제 그래서.
And then we talk about a third category of things that are extremely hidden or extremely concealed. These are things we're not able to know through direct perception. We're also not able to know through inference either. However, we accept them on the basis that they have been described by the Buddha.
Tani ta techo nala sangji ge tani jong nala techo sumbu do yorezi sangji ge jong nala ngonsum go tani ngubo techo yang mambo she yorezi tani jihok she goya ge tani ngubo yang mambo she yore tani khand ko jer go ngubo te yang perna le jim din da oda sengap shin da oda so korwa dire techo yang sangji ge mambo song yorezi sangji ge jong nala tani mambo yorezi.
And within the Buddhist teachings there the Buddha gives teachings that address all three of these realms. So there are teachings that talk about things that are able to be directly perceived. There are teachings that require us to use processes of inference. And then there are teachings that also deal with things that are, to our minds, extremely concealed in nature, like the karmic law of cause and effect, previous and future lives, etc.
디 상지가 디나라 중고 나라 딘디 송요나 드니 상지가 송요아 데소다 논트 득다만득 데이터고 그래서.
We need to assess, we need to evaluate among the different teachings that the Buddha gave in the different sutras, are they accurate or not? Are they mistaken or not?
드니 가서 takshishini oda nonchar mandu ziki tendisi ngaso hakosona teni ngaso yichishi chokoresi oda nonchar mandu ngaso yichishi nancha kandagu yang takpa resi nga chokore karti nonchar yona teni oda te yang takpa mare ngaso yichishi uman te yang tak mare zena chokoresi.
And it's through investigating the teachings and being convinced as a result of our process of investigation that we accept the teachings. If we investigate them and we find them to be erroneous or not in accordance with reason, then we are justified in not accepting them.
Teni shapa japsirtila ta ngaso kandi shapa japgo rezina teni ngaso chu nala teni tsikchigore tinala shapa simgi number takbaze shapa manjawa sim japji oreze shapa sim the number takbazina shapa sim the shapa japchawi jis o ta njungdu ta yang takbarendug zine teni resona o ta te jungde yang takbares karti ngaso shapa jabiona teni shapa te jabiona ti thola kyuncha yo pa teni hakosona o te shapa simgi matak bare ze gre o ten jug mud te kyundug ze gre te na teni ngaso te la yichi shenan jig marezi o shapa simdo shapa tangbo nipa simba jamni o te yakbo rendu samji ichi sona o yakbo rendu samba de ngacho shisona teni dazo ngacho khele na chokore ngacho ichi na chokore garte shapa simbo ti nala njigmena o teni ngacho ichi ga marezi.
So in terms of how we go about investigating and examining the teachings to test them for their veracity, there are three kinds of reasoning that we can use, and these three different stages of reasoning. And it's by subjecting the teachings to these three different kinds of investigation that we can establish the veracity of the teachings, and on this basis put our belief in them. If we subject the teachings to one of these investigations and the teachings fail to pass the test, then we're justified in rejecting the teaching.
Tani tanga zo sanje ga somba tela tani shapa simze ya te tambo kangre zena pena sanje ga tani songa nala ngaso ngonsum go muk rik thapa tindi ga tani lorji zu sheyo na pena ngaso sanje ga songa nala khatar ndi tani khatok korang karbu yen zene tindi ta ngaso muk ta na karbu re zindo tani karte sanje ga songa nala ndo marbu yen zene tindi shaja yo na tani ngaso umuk shitana te marbu mari karbu re ndo se tindi indi tunjug mandu te ngaso khelen ga man zena chokore.
So the first process or mode of investigation is by testing whether or not the teachings accord with our direct perception. So if the Buddha was to have said that this kada on the table is actually red in color, well, looking at it with our eyes, we can see that it is white. So on that basis, we would be justified in rejecting this statement.
Tani pena sanji songo nala khatar di khatokte tani karbu re zini tindi shaja yona oda ngaso karbu ore mere ngaso umuk shitana o karbu rindu si oda reyona oda rindu sanji ga somba te rindu zini de ngaso ichina de chokore si te tonda tambores.
However, if the Buddha was to say that this kada is in actual fact white, then we can look at it with our own eyes and seeing that it is white, accept this statement, and for this reason believe it, place our faith in it.
Tani karte ngaso muk tinim thongya tindi zga thola sanji ga somba te dang tani ngaso go mukum thonga tini ngarwa resona tani ti kapsa ngaso sanji ga song yinna yang tani ngaso khelen ga mare si ti kapsa te sanji ga tindi song du te sanji ga song du rite yinna sanji ga tini khorang ga tani thugla sanji ga tini samsar jambaz re khorang ga guba jambaz ga go ni tindi chini sombare rema tokpa tonga tola tindi mare se ngaso yindamada ngaso usuk gyabni khatongdi khatoti indamanda marbu ingo re te kandi rezena te sanji ga marbu rezendwa te barbu re go re tindi usuk gyabgi mare.
So if there is an inconsistency or a contradiction between what the Buddha sees or what the Buddha says and what we perceive through our own direct observation, then we are justified in rejecting the way that the Buddha has described it. If the Buddha says that the kada is a different color, then we can we appreciate that there must have been another reason why the Buddha described it as that. There's no reason for us to force ourselves to or brainwash ourselves to accept a description of something that doesn't accord with our direct perception just because the Buddha said it.
Tani te tondak tangbo shapa tangbori tani shapa nipati kangrezina sanji ga songya pena ngaso muk musun thongtaba tindi ma yinna ripa ga shanna tindi jumjo ya tindi yimba tindi yore techu korwata tani ngaso karti sanji ga songni jiwa ka go ni tani par jisa pa ni ripa go ni sha go ya tindi zka sanji ga pena tindi yin zeni sha yona tani ngaso go ripa ga tani pa yona tindi njyona ta ngaso te re tenga so khelen she ga yen zene tindi khelen she na chokore karti njig mena sanji ga tindi song yona yang 어떤가 저 킬링가 말이지 상지 송도 오지 리테 있나 상지가 딘지 송바딜라 코랑라 구바 잠바 요레 ngubo ne certa 딘지 말이지니 와서 킬링가 말이 마도 봐 뭔가 저 인담마다 상지가 딘지 송도가 또 인고 그러지니 딘지 랍고 말이지.
So that is the first mode of investigation. The second is one that relies on inference. So this is not necessarily using our direct perception. It is following a process of inference to establish the truth of a particular object or phenomenon. And if through engaging in a process of deduction we conclude that what the Buddha said is accurate, we can accept it. However, if our process of inference produces a result which is not in accordance with what the Buddha said, then we are justified in dismissing it. It's not necessary that we simply accept it again just because the Buddha said it was the way it was.
신도 고저지야테 할리바가 가서 시구나 시못봐 가서 먹은 통고나야 통 탐고 말에 되는 가서 지확 르바 샷고나야 샷탑고 말에 된지가 할리바가 되니 고저든지 디 코르도 가서 간디시고 오래잖아 어다 상지 코랑 것들이 송요나 되니 상지 것들이 송요 바텔라 띵니 디 값을 되니 더다 가서 이치시에 그래 옛날 때 값을 이치시에 그 염증 가르지나 때 값을 가서 상지 코랑 것들이 송바텔라 코랑 năng 띵 가르와 은득문득 따고 그러지 되니 코랑 năng 가르와 메나 어다 가서 때 마토 잠바가 탑시요 말에 어다 때 가랑 저거 따나 르그 말에 가랑 저거 되니 지확 고네야 시그 말에 상지 것들이 송득 때 연사래 지니 가서 되니 켈림시고 그러지.
And the third mode of investigation is one that applies to situations where things are extremely concealed. So it's in cases of situations or phenomena that are not able to be understood through direct perception, they're not able to be understood through inference. So on this basis, we have to accept what the Buddha said. However, in doing this, we need to look at the entirety of the Buddha's teachings, and if there is no contradiction between the Buddha's teachings in relation to a particular subject, then we can accept what he has said about it, given that we are in a situation of not being able to know about it ourselves through direct perception or inference.
드니가 조용들 몽들자오리도 말해외지나 가서 김선지지 메바가 돈요 상지가 손도 드니 나랑 예치가 연세나 드니세잖아 드니가 저다 영가 저다리 고나샤 반다오리네 드니 김선지지 메비토네 예치 쉐가요 말해외지나 대 말해지 상지가 드니 손나 가서 예치시 초거래지가 되라 영가 저 김선샤지요레.
It might seem in terms of this third mode of investigation, that simply believing something because the Buddha said it sounds like, in fact, believing in something blindly, which we criticized, in fact, earlier. However, in saying that we should believe in something because the Buddha described it as being the way it was, we have reasons for why we should believe the Buddha.
상지 세야텔라 코랑라 할리바가 되니 시럽 침보 되니 할리바가 되니 참 돈보고 되니 이시제나 상지가 시럽 되니 요와서 가서 상지가 송텔라 된나 지확 가서 시탑 그래지 상지 때 가서 뭐 잠바든 자면도 코랑가 송바텔라 따나 코랑라 문이 전에 할리바가 되니 이시 시럽 할리바가 통보 되니 너우지기 때 가서 지확 시탑 그래지.
It is, however, possible for us to infer, to deduce for ourselves that the Buddha, in fact, was in possession of an extremely high level of wisdom, an extremely high level of awareness, different from an ordinary person. This is possible for us to establish through processes of inference.
되니 치포와 건강나라 되니 맞서 무그 마음통와 되니 쪽착 되니 동착 망보요와 되니 가만히 쉬어요 그래서 되니 때 맞서 되니 무그 샤고 무그 따라 하고 말이 지허그 고네 양한테 핫고 듣고 말이 옛날 상지 거랑라 든지 고야 이시 시럽 든지 요바데 가서 상지 송데라 따나더니 하고 듣고 그래서.
So this is like saying that even if we have a bowl of water and just looking at it with our naked eye, we are not able to see all of the small life forms that exist within it. We're not able to necessarily know about these life forms through processes of inference either. However, the existence of these life forms being there is something that the Buddha, through his extremely high level of knowledge, is able to know.
Teni ten jawaza ka teni sarjega yang peranga so teni moschi ka teni libo ga nala teni strengwa mbo chongchong ka teni rig haliba mambo teni yoa teni ka teni ngamani song yore teso mangyang yore si ti strengwa teso mangyang yore teni jartong chumba mambo teni ga so loa ga nala ka de yo nyang ga nala ka de yo jema ga nala ka de yo teni mambo to teni koso mangyang chiri shini shaja yore si ngamani teni song yore te nga so ti kapsa teni nga so teni ta storntong x kwang storntong te yo marezi te mena teni ta nga so sarje ga teni jamba khorang la teni shia ga teni ta yishis yo ati nga so ha ko res.
So, for example, the existence of all different kinds of bacteria in the body, all kinds of microscopic germs, etc. The existence of these things was something that the Buddha described, and even gave names for the different kinds of bacteria, etc., that live in the lungs, the heart, and in different organs, etc. At that time, there was no X-ray or other means for actually seeing or examining these things. The Buddha established their existence through his sublime wisdom.
Teni ten jawaza ka tarong deli jang garchiwa teni pena nga so sanjega nga so teni drshchigina pena nga so choksin den raboyena teni de khorang teni dchundang teni deyang chongchong ko yongwa desong nga so tarta charik ba ga teni mulo gyachak mambo go rangla gormo dongshir mambo tangni teni jimjik ji jini khorang sagum thongate teni sarjega zungo nala ngama ni shaja yorisi teni te di kap sarjega teni song tapi gemsente teni sarjega khorangla teni teni tang zapo teni shia ga teni herbs khorangla yore te ma to di kap sa chachanda oda tsu yo mares.
So the fact that a table that we see before us is in fact comprised of an infinite number of atoms, etc., is something that we only know now after having spent millions of dollars on scientific research, etc. However, this was something that the Buddha described many 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. The fact that the Buddha was able to know this in an age where there were no instruments to directly perceive it shows us that his wisdom was of a extremely advanced and extraordinary nature.
Tindi tini ngaranso da sanji khorangla tindi ga tini thongya ga yishis ndo deyendi tini khoranga tini ngaranso te reze gona ze shigmandu marize gona ze shigmandu ta yena sanji ga tindi sona da khoranga tindi khorangla tindi shia ga tini rupa chabarwa shirp tindi ndo oda ngaranso deshina
So it's for this reason, in recognition of the extraordinary wisdom of the Buddha, that we are able to accept the way he describes things to be in situations where we are not able to know whether in fact they are the way they are, or we're not able to establish whether it is or isn't the case. It's given the wisdom of the Buddha that we are justified in believing what he said.
Tani pena nga zo de ganti da origin pena charik ba zo na tani khoranga tani ngukhamrik ba ga nala tani dir chamu chongchong gar namjak mambo zo khozo go jimjik mambo shini shake oresi tani te nga zo chama ga tela yichi ge oresi nga zo chama charik go ni tani shan du zena nga zo chama yichi ge oresi 옛날에 이치시기도 나랑서 자릉바고 샤파레즈네 가서 이치시그래 마도바 나랑서 소소 가서 먹었다 묘요 말했더니 가서 들총총된 리베나 차들 바지한다다 로드르지한다다 소사마 가서 먹었다 묘요 말해서 가서 남의 르묘요 말이 옛날 가서 자릉바가 된 리즈 다 인지레즈네 가서 이치시그래 그래서 지그래 니레 되니 더 가서 지화하고네 르바고네 삼로다나 가서 쪽진도 어더니 들차럽다다 로드르다 되니 지더니 더 차드르다 소리지니 되니 제고나 가서 지화하고네 르바고네 샤고나 티셔탑고 말이지 탑고 말에 가서 뭐레리 잠벌랑 뭐레리 소소랑 그 이치시니 랑랑 그 짐직시니 되니 이치시가 말이지 당가서 잠벌랑나 차르바 먹가적잔지 지니 숨지가 든지스 그 코초고 임직시네 든지 렌도세 드니 가서 잠밤 동실 든치 탐바 오테리즈니 테케 데 이치시어레 페르나 틴다 보레스.
So this kind of belief based on the fact that the Buddha described it as so is similar to the way that we accept many findings of physicists today about the nature of the world, physical objects, the way they're comprised of numerous atoms and electrons and molecules, etc. These are not things that each individual, each one of us has independently observed with our own eyes or has examined using the relevant instruments. Indeed, most of us haven't. Our belief in the existence of these elements of matter is based on the fact that scientists in fact tell us that this is the way things are. Similarly, not all of us have engaged in a process of inference to establish the existence of these elements. Indeed, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, for everybody to independently do the necessary research and arrive at that conclusion. So, in fact, the number of people who did the research and arrived at the conclusions we accept are very, very small, and yet, nevertheless, we accept their conclusions. And this is similar to the way that we are able to accept the teachings of the Buddha or the statements of the Buddha based on the fact of his superior wisdom.
Teni tarong teli gongla pe na zokba chimbo ra oda tso gona la nyamling ge tola ti mambo halipa tang zammo nga chu mu jamba z ge mu pharwa z ge nga chu pe na char ba ye na chanir ba ba ye na semkhum ru ba ye na mo chik yang teni zawani shi mamnyong wa teni ga halipa tang zammo teni mambo pe na zokba chimbo ra shagja chimbo ta tso gona la song yo re teni songyo bati so tamje po teni soso nyamnyung go ni gomgyamni teni shena teni sangje ga songba chi po za mayam bar soso nyamnyung go ni o sangje ga songba ta rendu sambati soso nyamnyung go ya o teni mambo teni halepa ga tangza mo mambo songyo re to so la ta na o sangji jingkente halepa ga teni ji herb chimbo yongkam halepa ga teni to ji khorang la teni mumkin Khenpa gyachin boyon contentis rendu sambate tengasola sosola ichi topkiores.
Another reason for us feeling justified in placing our faith in the way the Buddha described things to be is the fact that many of the truths that he described have been corroborated or confirmed by great practitioners of the Dzogchen teachings and the Mahamudra teachings. They have gained insights into things that scientists and philosophers and psychologists have not even begun to understand or describe. So the fact that through their experiential realization corroborate and confirm what the Buddha said, this is another reason we should feel justified in believing the Buddha's account of things.
Teni tenri yendi ta nga so sangji ge tenri gyachin bo ta teni nga so shirtang la nga so shigo na zawani shimata ba tenri mambo sangji khorang ge shine khorang ge songne teni lo tong cha ni da nga bya go na teni yege thola tini jak ba te nga so ta mambo ta ji yore se tenri yendi de la ta na oda nga so sangji te pe teni ta hajang teni khenpa gyachin bo yong ken teni re ndu sambate nga so teni yichi de 김승 그 돈에 가서 이치 그래 마도 봐 잠바 말에 때 가서 김승 그 돈에 산지 때문에 장에 든지 그더니 시럽 자친 보용 근데 레삼바데 가서 이치 덮지요 그래서.
So it's for this, we do have reasons, therefore, for believing in the exceptional and extraordinary wisdom of the Buddha. It's necessary that we, now reading the teachings of the Buddha 2,500 years afterwards, accept them on the basis of reasons. And we certainly have reasons for believing in the extraordinary wisdom of the Buddha's account.
다 든지 인디 산제 같더니 송고나라 든지 할리바 같더니 땅 잡보다 고고나 똑가와다 든지 마보 송고와데 가서 따따따용나더니 산제가 송와데더니 무스어 산르기야 진로 사위네 그 마보자 하고 요러 든지 오늘 렌드 삼바 든지 따따 가서 마보자 하고 온도 데 인디 산제 같더니 다 송고나라 카시카시스 든지 가서 증득세거나 가서 하고 문득세거나 가서 하고 문득다 옛나양 산지가 다른 것들이 멍보 송화돼서 사마더니 양딱 받더니 렌도 대옛나 대가서 가시 가서 어더니 증만득세 시금 문득때 옛나 대 연사를 삼리 대 고랑 이 지잖아 초콜릿.
So the fact that the Buddha described things in the scriptures that may on the surface appear extremely profound, difficult to understand, etc. The fact that they have been in many situations confirmed or corroborated by findings of modern science is a reason for us to have conviction in the accuracy of the Buddha's account of things. So there may be situations where we where we accept certain teachings, and others we might feel are perhaps less convincing. However, given overall the exceptional and extraordinary wisdom of the Buddha, we should be justified in believing his accounts.
드니 든지 인디 드니 가서 양 산지가 송고나라 따용나 양 카시에서 드니 배나 가서 문슴 드니 가서 통해야 되다 많던 바 든지 양 요레스 산지가 송바가 산지가 송고나라 산지가 송오바티 송고나라 가서 배나 묵다나 가서 어더니 통화 되다니까 가르와 인간 든지 양 요레스.
Among the Buddhist scriptures, among the Buddhist teachings, the things that the Buddha said, there are situations that don't accord with what we can directly perceive with our own eyes.
드니 가서 남바 산지 바거더니 코랑가 싸둔데 강레지나 싸위 싸둔데 강레지나 갈티 르바당 몬탄 바당 드니 갈티 가서 몬성당 몬탄 바당 드니스 있나 드니 산지가 송 요나양 가서 켈랭게 말에 산지가 송 요나 드니 마레지니 제그레스 어떻게 잡고 말이지.
However, what the Buddha said was that if there is something that doesn't accord with our direct perception, it also doesn't accord with processes of reasoning, then even though this was attributed to the Buddha, this particular teaching, we don't need to accept it. We shouldn't force ourselves to accept it.
Then they can't reason that Sanjay Sunganala got so mukata, got so monsum than Garvat into yours. Yona, this Sanjay Konaka Mamkim Bari, Koranga Mashia Arezina. They marry Sanjay Mashia Mari, the capsule thinning out on Nambago, the knee Jangdun Ziachita, Nidon Zia, Tinti Tonta Nigatoni Ayachigres, Jangdun Ziatan, Nidon Ziag, and Reshi Captain Niores.
However, if there is a situation where something in the sutras doesn't accord with our direct perception, we shouldn't therefore think that this was because the Buddha lacked the necessary knowledge or was mistaken. In respect of these contradictions or inconsistencies, we talk about the two different kinds of meaning, or the two levels of meaning, the provisional meaning and the definitive or ultimate meaning.
Tini ngidon zeyati kanti zila ngunzang kawar zina ngidon zeyati tini korang ka tonga thola kanti yenna te pa thakar jangmo shini tini yang tak bigo ni par shaw jawatela tini ngidon zegarezi.
When we talk about the ultimate meaning or the definitive meaning, we mean the meaning that is a straight, direct, unobscured description of the way things are.
Tini jangdon zeyati kanri zina 돈 ngoma te te mare sanji korang ka tinti song yore ta dong ko thola tinti mare Tinti marita yena tini takar tini tsama par yakpo shavjagna di kap ko mocho tini korang so ko yakpo len thap ko marezi korang so tini o sarje ko songji den drug mandik samni tinti samjo gore tinti samjo na tini sarje ko mote cho tini korang so ko samlo tam thamba goni kaja ju shadni kale yar tini nilikuton demba denthik kale korang la tini yar khatangwa o tinti ko kaja yore tela changdun se gres.
The provisional meaning refers to teachings that are not ultimate or definitive in nature. Essentially, they were teachings made in a certain way, given taking into account the needs or the situation of the listeners at the time. So the provisional teachings were given in the way they were for the reason that if things had been imparted in a more direct and ultimate way, then people would have not been able to understand them in the correct way. So provisional meanings were made in accordance with the situation of the listeners so that they would gradually, in accordance with reasoning, be able to progress in their understanding.
다 던지 인딩 아주 응도스르드나 간지 고고레즈나 디릅니시 짝직반디 나라 내가 알아서 차르그지야데 배 할리바가 가르침부 무창마가 아손 잠발은 건너 샤르너 강라요나 무창마가 차르그지나 할리바 가르침부 딘디 양딱바딘디 즈그레 딘디 양딱바즈위 딘디 디캅즈 레시.
So right now in the 21st century we are in an era where science is regarded as with extreme legitimacy. It's regarded as an extremely valid discourse by many people.
Teni 차르그제나 teni korang teni 양딱바 레베제나 테 마리지 양딱바 인바양 요레 양딱바 마인바양 뭐 korang kanang라야 노르와양 mambo 요레스 teni 차르그제야 teni korang 같은 잠볼랑라 용컨게 십샤 참마 korang hakung kendiri zirizina te marizi 차르그 나라 먹고 차르그 짜와니 하 먹고야 든지 그 돈다가 mambo 요레스 차르그제야테 teni 또 korangla 노라 mambo 요레스 korang 그 셔땅 그 차르그제야테 teni 노라 짜와니 멘켄 teni 마레즈 노라 mambo korang 나라 논터리 양 mambo 요레스 teni 차르그제야테 맞소 teni 십샤 참마 신켄 zirizina 대양 마레즈 korang 그 마시와 양 mambo 요레스.
So science is not something that is without errors. In fact, there are many errors within different areas of science. Science, at the same time, is not a discipline that knows everything. There are many fields of knowledge that science doesn't have an understanding of.
옛날에 그런 거 돈딱 mambo스 그 돌아 그런 거 덴바레스. 이 김신지 되는 아주 정말 콜라 이치치 그래스.
However, it's because science, in fact, is or has established the truth in relation to many things, or is, tells us, produces true findings in respect of many areas. This is the basis on which we accept the validity of science.
든지 인디티니 가서 디름니시 짝식 바거든이 낭추제라디 드니 차르 그 낭니 거랑가 마시와당 거랑 그 노르스와 때다 가서 남바가 따와 닌가라요나 대교요 말에 레디 차르 그 토니 샤피 돈 뭐마 양딱 바이엠바트 소다 드니가 좀 망거와즈 남바상기 바거든이 따와데 인 고그리 댕가리앙 가르가 말이스 당아서 남바상기 바거든이 따와제야데 감디즈레제나 차르크나라 노라요레 차르크 마시 바요레 소단 가르나 경고 말이지 가르나야 난거요 말에 가려 난거 원정 차르크나라 차르크 양딱 바요레 대당 가르나 듣고 말이지 대 간에 머득비 짐승 가르제 대 원섬 레지 원섬다 망가와서 고레지 가죠.
So in the 21st century, conflicts between Buddhism or the Buddhist, between Buddhism and those aspects of science that are mistaken, or those areas that science doesn't have an understanding in respect of, if there are conflicts in these areas, it's not a big deal, it's not problematic. The problematic conflicts are between Buddhism or the Buddhist tradition and areas in which science has established knowledge that we regard as true. The reason is because these things are true. The scientific findings have established the truth. So it's in respect of conflicts between these things and the Buddhist tradition that need to be resolved.
Tene ngacho sarigda mangarwas gogorizeyati kangrezina ngacho tartan zambolong mo chamaga chariglam yichi mamboche ge yore di gimsinji ngacho khola mangarwas gogore tse areze te mareze te kangrezida charig nala korang yang tak ba yingken tso chama te korang ngonsum reze ngacho ngonsum goruk bazete te reze tene ngonsum da mangarwati nge tari kona shapa smyo batinani chigreze te ngacho nambaga zatun reze ngacho tsavi zatun re tene ngonsum da mangarwas gona tene charig da mangarwas gogores.
So the reason that we need to resolve these contradiction between scientific findings of truth and the Buddhist tradition is not because everybody regards science as an extremely authoritative discourse. It's because these findings are based in fact, they are based in truth. And as we said earlier tonight, establishing things on the basis of direct perception, on the basis of truth, is in fact a cornerstone of the Buddhist tradition. So it's very important that we address inconsistencies or contradictions between things that science has proved as true and the Buddhist tradition.
Tene ngaso maung bana pe na charig yargis songni lo tongchak mambo lo chuchak mambo nala charig yargis song tene khoranga hale baga tene chi tene de jachimbo tene karte te sar ke shiwa tene yonayang te ngaso nangba khodang garando marese mundubi gimsen de karese na te khoranga nguni tane yang tak ba guni shipa inna te so sangba charig ke shapa so ngonsum tak tak re ngo gorese ngonsum tak tak re tene ngaso ngonsum 산지가 송거나라 원섬다 망가르와치고 손들이 송어래 된디 되는 가란도 말에 대단 가라 만조와티 가서 디름니시 자식 바가나라 가서 남바거든요 종들이 마도 봐 잠바출라 때때서 까보요래 되나 가서 자동 찍그레스.
So in the future, if science continues to flourish, it continues to advance to continued heights, this won't cause a problem for Buddhism. This won't constitute a problem from the Buddhist tradition, from the point of view that if what science is investigating is the truth, it's grounded in empirical fact, then this is in absolute accordance with the Buddhist tradition. The Buddha was emphatic that, in fact, the things that do not accord with reality shouldn't be accepted. So it's for this reason that the Buddhist tradition won't have a problem with the continued progress or development of scientific research.
The yina ngaso berna ngaso namba nala teni simkum go thola haliba tangzabu mambo sheyori mo simkum teni mo chechok go thola ya teni haliba teni tangzabu mambo sheyori te maim ba shor kan jikting ka kham ka thola ya na teni namba ha liba tang zabu mambo shyand to so sangma teni char ka sawani ha go yo mare se khorang ka go yo mare maung ba na teni yargin rovine kamna teni chishina ha go reze ina tata sawani ha go yo mare teni te char ka ha mago wa te so teni dangara so namba ka te tawa nga so thmo mai bare te so chi char ka tang go mare khorang so ha go na chokore ha ma go na chokore nga so te tang go mare se.
However, the Buddhist tradition has great insights and profound knowledge of the human mind, human psychology, the human consciousness, and also many great and profound insights into the material world, the worldly affairs as well. And these are insights that science, in fact, doesn't know much about. It hasn't researched much. It's possible in the future that scientific investigation will confirm or corroborate these things, but this, in fact, doesn't make a difference to us. Whether or not science confirms these things or is interested in these things isn't really the issue. This is not something that we should be concerned with legitimizing ourselves through.
Teni ngacho mi semkam go teni tang zapo go thoni mi semkam la nreshi jawa tang. Teni tang zapo go thoni mi teni chechok la teni ta nreshi jawa tang. Teni mi teni ta semga nala yopi nyomu ba da. Teni dungmar ta nyokta teso tamshi po mar mepa shiya. Teso la nreshi japchi ta teni ngacho namba chi po teni chachunda bore ma to ba jamba changrik ta teso la chi ka ke yo mare te yo maina te nangkaji yo ma korancho mena ngacho telam thamboshi go mare te ngarancho chachuri te ngarancho nreshi jab go gores.
So the Buddhist tradition is unique in its particularly nuanced and profound explanation of the human mind, the human consciousness, the nature of human afflictions and negative emotions, etc. And this is the unique character or the unique characteristics of the Buddhist tradition of Buddhism. And whether or not these are things that science is interested in or science proves is not something we need to be overly concerned with.
That tenji indi ngacho zambolana yongkhen ga teni nangba sangji ba sangma ga teni lojong shiate pe karchimbores nangchula lojong ya bo shiate pe karchimbores.
So it's given this this realm of knowledge that Buddhism has such insights into that make the Buddhist tradition as important as it is and something very much worthy of the study by many people in the world.
Teni ngacho zambolana yongkhen ga teni nangba ga nala lojong shinken haliba nyungnyung res. Lojong shinken nyungnyung re. Yeah.
However, in the world today, the number of people who are in fact studying the Buddhist teachings is relatively small.
Teni ngacho zambolana yongkhen ga nangba sangji ba mambo haliba mambo zgateni ngacho gewa dribzeate ka nizre ngacho domba donje te so she ka yores.
Many people, in respect of how to go about doing meritorious work or how to accumulate merit, think that the way to do this is by chanting mantras, reciting prayers.
Teni ngacho lakang chimbo jawe anda teni choten chimbo le anda teni larka halepa ga zigbo jawe anda tso ngacho halepa tondak chimbo la joko yores.
Many people regard building and constructing stupas and shrines and Buddhist statues as extremely important. They place their priorities on these things.
Teni tarong jang tele dikchak te gangresena teni ngacho mamboz ga ngacho pe nan dombando nanda larka yen le nanda gomba jam nanda tso sangma chongli jan shangye hwazena chongli jang ga teni nambala gerne teni tito gurmu mambo chaya da teni ga tapshi mambo she ga yores.
And even worse than this, many people these days are in fact using the building of shrines and Buddhist statues, churtens, etc. as opportunities to make money. They are commodifying these things.
Teni be na ngacho boba la sang lo tang ba na ngacho boba ga lama cho wang ja karna teni wang par karna teni tinani gormo mambo le ya teni gonjun chong teni tinani gormo mambo ra ya thabshi she an ra hoda yang chokba mambo chokni teni chokba mambo chokne ya tinani teni ta gormo mambo le ya teni ga thabshi ngacho chi wang kar che teni chi de mai ba teni domba mambo ndo ya tso la teni gormo mambo ra ya teni ga le kalin kampe mambo res.
And even in Tibet, there are many lamas who are using the giving empowerments and selling statues, holding Dharma events, Dharma assemblies as opportunities to make money.
Teni ngazo boba ga teni mangchok ra wo yena teni chu tapa pe yakbo yores rete chu shig mare tapa pe yakbo yore te chu shig mare chama 많은 돈 이제 다 teni shang 차려야 다 teni ma tok ba chi shig mare.
And in terms of the Tibetan community inside Tibet, everyone has very strong faith, but they don't understand the reasons for their faith. Their faith is not underscored by reason.
Teni te matsangaso trabacho na la na trabacho mush sonan domban ya da teni mus jamba chola domban ya da domban ya ta yung susurang kun chowa thola mulan domban ni tina ne la chan ya da teni ma to ba nguni changni teni sanji ge chula lojung yak bo che ata gum yak bo jam kunti nyonyo ma to yo mare ji taba na la azu boba ga taba na la.
And even among monks in Tibet, the number of people who are actually sincerely studying the Buddhist teachings and practicing the Buddhist teachings is relatively few. The majority of people, a majority of monks essentially spend most of their time doing prayers and recitations and other ritual services for people in order to support their livelihood.
Teni yami teni chuba so yenana teni to yang mambu zo ko so teni ju gomba nalan do ni teni pujo ya teni gomba nalan do ni pujo ya ta teni halam choban par ya ta teni yar halam choban par ne teni ngarang go ju ngarang so so la cherang ya ta nan me ya ta teni shawa lam do yung ya teni go ton dak la teni hala puncho ya ta hala shang sara teni go so she ko yores yami chuba so.
And in respect of Chinese followers of Buddhism, many people really spend most of their time going to temples, making incense offerings, supplicating the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas for good luck and prosperity and things like this.
Tani yami chubana pena ngaso Taiwan jado ndoso nangla yena tani tan hakang chimbo jawya ta halipa ga tani lola mshwa dawo tani hakang chimbo jawya da tani mshotin chimbo ke chimbo leya tsola lama tso tso tola shigyab goris.
And in Taiwan, practitioners and lamas really spend most of their energies on building vast and colossal temples and dharma structures.
Tani ngaso sama tendishini de yore te ma so ba sanji nguni tangni sanji ga kandi song sanji ga jinti gomba kandi rezeni lojong shinkende tani nyonyong ma to yo maresi chu nyonyong se ngaso boba na la yore yami na la yore te ma to ba nyonyong yore ma to ba mang che shu ti le shi ka mandu se.
So the majority of Buddhist followers are essentially occupied by doing these things. The number of people, whether it be among Tibetans or among Chinese, who are sincerely studying and practicing the Dharma is very small.
Tani tanga zo bobanda yena tani korang ga chu yak boyin kom choksum yak boyin zegri ya yak boyin bi jimsen kanji ta jorang ga shi labda zena te ko marezi te tang aran so lama ga yak bore zegri ya tin da ma to pa jen sing marezi.
And Tibetans have great faith, very strong faith in the three jewels in the Dharma. However, if you ask them the reason for why the Dharma is so good, the Dharma is sublime, no one's able to tell you an actual concrete reason. They say things, oh, my Lama is very great, and things like this. They're not able to state reasons for their strong faith.
Tani yami nangla tari tere koso tani ju soro anda we anda tani pudo anda gomba na lando ne chiteni leka le anda tendis ma to ba teni sarje ga song ngomati kangre yan teni ya shinken ya gamen dendi mo mangbore rete tinala chu ngoma ga teni ta to la samlo tang ka pe nyonyo res.
And in respect of Chinese Buddhists, with everyone making their incense offerings, supplicating the Buddha, or many people these days doing volunteer work inside temples, etc., still the number of people who really know the content of the Buddha's teachings is not great at all.
Tani yami nesar tang boba nesar nge hale basaro go resi tani joran so no shok paso kandi shego nge ha go maresi ta parche choso tijis lo sona pedik boresi.
So the situation of Tibetans and the situations of Chinese is something that I'm very clear about. I'm not so clear about the situation of Westerners here in the West. However, if you follow in the footsteps of the Tibetans and Chinese, it will be a very terrible situation indeed.
Yeah.
What I've just described is not the way that we should go about practicing the Dharma in the 21st century.
Yinda mayin yang tak ba hako ni muksaru shini lamla tani dani komba jamni rogo re ma to bangaran so muksaru mayin ba mukatini chichi mark patindi shina tani rona lamka kakani mar lamjibla hongore tinja bores.
So it's now, even more than we've ever needed it in the past, that we need to cultivate wisdom. It's very important that we, through our own direct perception, through our own process of reasoning, determine whether things are true or not, whether they are, whether we believe them or not. It's important that we are able to see with our own eyes and determine with our own eyes the path in front of us, so that we don't drop off into some undesirable place on the side.
Teni nga chogo da tiramye shi sachi bagana la charga hali ba yar jin ro yore teni musoso teni muchogo mo gir ke teni rigni ge chisu be yar gongpen ro yore teni ti kapsa teni nga ran so teni to nangba ge chu lo jong she ge yen zen ken ge mo de so ge teni chi chi lo jong ma shi chi chi ha ma ko sa ji ge song ka ri ha ma ko jin chi jing chi chi ma ha ma ko ni ten ru shi ni de na teni 사기가 손대 되는거니 트라디셔널 몬트 마리지 되니 몬트 마리테 할리바가 되니 셔럽당다 비타바틴지 리데 레데 나랑수 사마가 되니 다 남발라 로종 신근 사마가 지직 마시 되니 레소나 되니 사기가 손야 몬트 그 잡라 홍조 그레스.
So even though the Buddha urged us not to have a blind faith in his teachings, if in the 21st century, despite our material progress, despite our high levels of educational attainment, we simply put faith in the Buddha's teachings blindly, then essentially we will be doing what the Buddha urged us not to do.
로종시에데 백가르진 버리제 가서 토머 되는데다 로종시에 거를 마도 방가서 토머 지지하마고 고니 친 지지 마시 위값선에 되는 아주 많은 동야당 샹차리야당 되니 지더니 초반바리야다 되니 딱딱 나라 남사 땅나 되니 대 실당 샹차나 대수 돈도 요 말이지 그 말이다 이나 디 충고만 말이지 충고마데 띵지 말이지.
So, in the contemporary era, regardless of whether it's Tibetans or Chinese or Westerners, the threefold path of listening, reflecting, and meditating is extremely important. So the first stage, studying the Buddhist teachings, is very important. Simply, doing prostrations and recitations, making offerings without having an understanding of the Buddhist teachings, while it's perhaps not possible to say there's no meaning or benefit in doing these whatsoever, or it's not possible to say there isn't any benefit in these things. Nevertheless, without knowing the Buddhist teachings, this benefit is relatively small.
Teni terang rigpa chusoko teni koso ngala karizegzena tangacho dirim nyeshi tsachi bagana teni mocho nyamlin china nyamlin nyangpu rawo de kanti shegondo dikola kamta jizene koso teni shakanduse.
And this evening I was asked by several Rigpa students to speak to what the essence or the key focus of practice for Buddhists in the 21st century should be.
Tintiina nyamling ka nyambo tisha guna tambu ngarang so mashi pada mandrik pada ngaso kyunde tambu she gore mato kyunde tambu mashina tini ngaso kyun mayim ba yangtak bade kangende hago maris.
So before speaking about what essentially the essence of our focus should be, it's important to speak about the errors and shortcomings and inadequacies. It's only by first addressing these that we then know what the proper path to follow is.
Teni te yendi teni nge ngaso bobada teni yamiga teni chubacho teni ngaso tarta lama so yenandra teni ngaso loma so yenandra teni chu yang tak ba teni to lojong shi matap teni shawa jamba tak leni teni ndung du jite teni choncha rin du teni shina teni ngaso teni nyamling ka nyambo kana yo hago marezini mete sha goya ga jimsang chite yens.
And so it's for this reason to expose or to shed light on, in fact, what the essence of our practice should be, that I have first spoken about the inadequacies and shortcomings of Tibetan lamas and lay practitioners and Chinese followers too.
Teni ta ngaso teni junti te yenna teni ta yang tak ba ta ba te ngaso kan ri go orizina teni ta 댐종이나 댐장 댐종 동닛 다 댐질 어때야 보즈 가서 로종시 고레스 가서 강라 로종시 고즈나 데라 로종시 고레스.
So in terms of what the correct focus of our or the correct orientation, what we should be concerning ourselves with is the study of dependent origination and emptiness.
Teni 똥반이 그돈 땜중고 돈 대야보즈 teni 하고 소나 teni 가서 똥녀제야 대당 땜중제야 대 측징이디 teni 가서 잠발랑다 직진 참말란 레시 잡나 레시 잡탑 그래서 똥녀다 땜중제야 teni 디 돈닥 대 니보더 teni 가서 teni teni 그 직진 그 감달라 파른 레시 잡나 레시 잡탑 그래서 잠발랑데 우보 강당가야나 돈이 많이 봐요 말에 댐중 많이 봐요 말에 돈이 땅 댐중 약보 고소나 되니 가서 사마하고로 그래서.
And it's by developing an understanding and realization of these two things, emptiness and dependent origination, that we will be able to understand and explain the nature of all phenomenon in the world.
되니 띠돌랑 알아서 되니 돈이 그나네 할리바가 잡슈데 강레제나 배나가서 되니 야미 그더니 다 주나네 있나 배나 한종진이 되 고수 되니 셔대와 되니 심기랑진 샤바테 페잡모 야보레스 되니 가서 보거나라 있나 되니 배나 샤갸침보다 조바침보 되니 샤바 어때 할리바 땅 잡모다 할리바가 되니 되니 요리 되니 대또 어시미시 되니 달고레스.
So in respect of emptiness, and the nature of the mind, the Chan teachings have many deep and profound explanations and insights into these. So too do the Mahamudra and Dzogchen teachings of the Tibetan tradition. So it's in terms of realizing these things that we need to orient our energies.
Tini terang에 샤야가 tini 돈다 섬근하네 tini 당보 따와지야 데 대연스.
So in respect of the first thing that I began by talking about tonight, the importance of view, these things are all relevant to that, developing a proper view.
Tini nipato tini 당아서 따와도 그다 묵다와래 tini ngaso 묵거 tini 람카테 약보 르차르나 tini 단 조고 그래 조아테 teni gomba segre teni gomba de condition go teni tabdiz teni moto shekins.
So once we have established the proper view, we have determined with our eyes the path we need to follow. It's now necessary for us to take steps to move along that path. So I'd now like to address the second point of meditation or practice.
Teni gomba gum nyamrin zeate teni ngacho teni gomba 할리바 엄마스 엄마모니 되니 름바 준데 야르 갈리 로고레 페나가서 보고 총총소 로종시 비네캅나 당부 롭다 총총로 되니 롭다 장본로 되니 롭다 침봉나란로 안다 보레 름진 로고레스 당부 가서 레라보도 곰고레스.
So in respect of our meditation practice, it's essential that we follow a gradual path, taking things step by step in the proper process, in the proper order of progress. So just as we begin with primary school and move on to middle school or high school, so too with our meditation practice do we need to start off with the basics.
되니 가서 무스당슬라에 나가서 따압 통부뱀 통보요나 약보레지. 이나 곰바팅가 좀 마무니 야야야야얀로고레 마도 곰바팅 통보니 마리오나 던저거 말이지.
So in respect of view, it's great if we have a really high view, a really advanced view, but in terms of our practice, it's important that we start off at the beginner level, at the basics, and then progress from there. Starting off at the very highest level is not a viable approach.
근데 인디 가서 보바가 추념련시 대큰 것들이 뭐 가시 그러나 가서 잠바들이 가서 문종라고 다 되니 가서 로도남시 문조 세마딱 바담주니까 근데 가서 곰곰만세 아랑가 족바침보 곰곰 당보니 아랑가 족바침보 곰곰지 근데 생각 마음 가서 보바가 나라요래 야은 나라 근데 마음도 되니 저런 좀 납쇼고 미나라 근데 요사레스.
There are many people who say that in actual fact we don't need to concern ourselves with the preliminary practices. It's not necessary for us to meditate on the four thoughts that turn the mind, for example. It's quite okay to go straight to the Dzogchen teachings. There are many people in Tibet who say this. There are people in China who say this too, and I dare say there are probably people in the West who think this way as well.
Teni tindishina teni te tongsam nguma terezi tongsam rezi ten jibjiwa marete te tongdak jijiwa marze ngaso pena khangba sak go tolandro gona lokke gana landro na tambo sak tambo nani lokke gana la paranzene teni yarandro gore ma to ba tambo ni sak jiba tola marandro sa te yo marete te dang chik paresi.
But this view or this is completely empty. It's unfounded. If we want to go to the 10th floor of a building, it's necessary that we get in the lift and go up, ascend level by level. It's not possible to fly or jump to the 10th floor all of a sudden at the very beginning.
Karti kyorang teni sak gaba gana la de denken tambu ni kyorang teni im thombo zela lip de yong kenzigina teni sak gaba gana ni par lokke gana landrona teni yarandrona chokores.
Of course, if you're on the 9th floor or to begin with, then it's possible for you to get in the lift and go up to the 10th floor.
Karti kyorang tangbo sak tangbo uthola dede yong sak tangbo uthola chi masala dede yong tindizina teni sak tangbo na ne par lokke na lanze gore ma to ba sak gabada jabada tisutola ndrotabyo mares.
However, if you live on the first floor of this building, it's necessary for you to get in the lift and go up from the first floor. It's not possible for you to start your ascent at the 8th or 9th levels.
Tendi ndo samna nga so sak tambola de yong kense nga sak gabani parndo yensena te tongsam rezi do tab ko mare se kadin ro gore do tab ko mare ye kyo kate sak gabani parlo ke nalan ro na tini tambo kyo sak gabalan ro go tini parndo gore te ma ton ro ya yo mare te dang chik bares.
So a person who lives on the first floor wanting to start immediately or go immediately to the 9th floor, this is just a thought made in vain. If one wants to ascend to the 9th or 10th floors, it's necessary to ascend each floor one at a time.
Teni teyin sarti teni nga so sama darta nga so sama le tangbo ba yindi teni nga so sama tsak tangbo la de yong ken tata ma to chijang yo mare si sama tsak tangbo la yo re teni chi kwarang so taranga yanchu gum yakbo jabne teni nyamtok halipan thombo teni yong ken na teni tsak jaba gaba teni la yong ken yujiri ma to ba ngarang so teni ta nga so sarde teni le tangbo ba shini nangchula lojong shenken teni zina nga so sama tsak tangbo la yo re si te yo na nga so tsak tangbo ni par lokke na lan zi go tabdup che go res.
So if we are beginners to Buddhism, if we're people just starting out, then it's important that we recognize that we are on the first floor and we need to get in the lift and ascend from the first floor.
Tani sak tangbo de kare re zina da nga so lodok namje zena choko yana nga so tmungu ngunru zena chokondu yana nga so nimjung gum zena chokore donla chikbare te resi te sak tangbo teni lokkenra wo te resi te na nga so musda se nanja thomar nga so teni tharwi lam yang takba chu yang takba nga so nyamlin chi teni samna teni jamba nga so jiwa kake yo mare tambo kale shini teni lordok namje ta gomgo res ngonro te gomgo re tmungu ngonro te gomgo res.
So the first floor or the first level of practice as beginners is the four thoughts that turn the mind, the four common preliminary practices.
Tani lordok namje te yakboz gomjagna tani nga so semla karike ongre ezena tani nga so semla nimjung sambaze te kegres.
So the objective of engaging in the four common preliminaries is to generate the mind of renunciation.
Teni nimjung ko sambaze te kangrisla zegrezina tanga so moshke na nga so mur sola samlo mambo yoreze nga so masindala teni so la teni mugir mambu yore ta kashi na korang shikbu shi na te nga mutsi muyir ta ngarang jipshikbu shi na te gaang samkan tenri yore kashi na teni ngarang teni pumbu chimbo wangchap chimbo yongkan tenri shi na gaang samkan tenri yore kashi na ngarang nyanchak zambalangla kongkan tenri shi yong na samkan yore susu mutsi muyir te teni ramira mambu res.
So when we talk of renunciation, when we speak of renunciation, we recognize that as ordinary beings we have all kinds of thoughts, all kinds of aspirations. Some people in this life want to achieve wealth, some people want to achieve status, other people want to achieve fame.
다 ngacho di kapsa ngacho ta moschike pe ngacho ngonro gomna ngonro gombi jis teni korang ka samlo kan de chegezena ta ngarang la gemambo yona chokondu menaya nangka chimbo mundu de ngarang la wangcha chimbo yona ndikre menaya te nangka mundu teni ngarang la teni nyanjak halipa chimbo yona ndikndu te menaya teni te nangka chimbo mundu ta ngarang yindam manda ngarang goyati kangrezena teni nga tarwa thugo nduze ngarang tele ngasung korwa ganala nga kirga nanche dungmar mambo ndute ngarang tarwa thugo nga yindamanda tarwa lamla tarwi lamla nganro yin samba ga samlote pe yakboz kesona teni tela ngimjong ga samlo zegres.
So renunciation, the result of us having engaged in the preliminary practices is arriving at a point where we feel that it's okay if we're rich, it's okay if we're not, it's no big deal if we're not, and so it is in respect of all our other worldly pursuits, whether it be status and fame, etc. Essentially, our new priority becomes entering onto the path of liberation and transcending the sufferings of cyclic existence. That is what becomes our essential priority.
Teni tadangal tarwi lamlan rogo ndu sambaga samlote teni yakboz teni kesona teni tanga so teni ngimjong zegre ngimjong te yakbo kesona teni ngaso tarwi lamlan roya ngosuk sonwaris.
So it's this desire, this resolve to transcend cyclic existence and enter into the path of liberation that is renunciation. And when we've cultivated renunciation, when we've developed this, we have begun our journey along the path of liberation.
Teni tenji samlo yung gona tanga yindamanda ngarang tarwatu gogundu sambaga samlo tenji gona teni te le labo mareze te ngaso samlo mambo tango gore teni shok ni samlo mambo tangna teni tazo ta ngarang ka samna ta jabatsu tondak chimbuji mundu ta gimambo yona njik mena te tondak chimbuji mundu ta ngaso teni nyanchak da wangcha ta te so yona chukundu mena te nanga mundu te tondak chimbu mundu nguni changni tondak yoya nyambu yoya ngumate ta tarwa topna te re samgare ina te ngaso samlo mambo tango gore mato ba te samlo mambo mato na ngaso tindi samlo yung gona pe le labo mareze.
So generating this desire to attain liberation is not something actually that comes easily. It's something that we can only generate after a really long practice of contemplating on many different issues and contemplating on things from many different perspectives. And it's only after having engaged in this really thorough process of reflection that we are able to generate a strong feeling that engaging in other kinds of things isn't really meaningful, and that what we want as our key priority is in fact liberation from cyclic existence.
Teni ta ngaso ton gomba niba de kangrezena ta ngarang tarwa thogo ndu samni tarwa thoya te ngaso ngalam tarwa lam te lan roya te thakcha chawi jini teni ta kare samko rezena ta ngarang rang chingpo tarwa thomna te tondak chimbo menduse ta ngaso zambalang la teni motong shir dunchi yore tinane ngarang moschi tarwa thomna te tondak chimbo jimendu ne tsama tarwa thoya teni tablange samlo tanggo nduze ngaso tsama tarwa thoya tenjis ke tolange samlo tanggo ndug mato ngarang rang chipo tarwa to sona ta tondak chimpo jimendu samne teni tit gomba nibati tenjis samlo tanggo gores.
So the second step after we have generated renunciation is reflecting on the fact that achieving liberation just for oneself is in fact not very meaningful. There are 7 billion other people in the world, and so just achieving one's own liberation and not concerning oneself for that of others is not an excellent situation.
디 삼로도 델리장 릴라보 말이지 당가 촌 잠볼랑 뭐 탐치 당더니 다른 잠볼랑 찍그 차그 말이 무스찍그 영 차그 말이 심신 탐치 제고래 가서 남바였나 심신 탐치 되니 다루와 도야가 돈다 디돌랑에 삼로도 디돌랑에 레카시 디돌랑에 바순치그 영 삼비 삼로도 델리장 릴라보 말이 할리바 카보레스.
However, this desire or this turning one's mind, in fact, to the situation of others, the liberation of others, and the determination to work and strive and make all kinds of efforts to bring about the liberation of others is something that doesn't come about easily at all.
Teni nga tsu teli kyang samlo mambo tang go gore samlo mambo tang na teni gimtsen mambo go thola samlo tang na teni nge ngarang chikpo tharwa thop na ndrik mandu ze simchen thamche tharwa thop go ndu ze te gowi gimtsen kang re ze ta te gimtsen mambo yore tsu chama go thola teni ndang mambo je samlo mambo tang ne teni shione teni kale nga so teni sim go tang ne o 다 나랑 직보 타르와톱나 나랑 타르와도 톱고 근도다 이나 나랑 직보 톱나 돈다 치보면도 당니 참마 타르와톱야가 돈달랑인 바바시가 삼지 삼로도 더니 타마 기용거리 더니 데라 상습 그 심제 그래서.
So it's for this reason the difficulty of generating this aspiration to work for the liberation of others in addition to oneself, that it's necessary to again do a great deal of contemplation and reflection on the situation of other beings, their suffering, why we should in fact work for their benefit, etc. And it's by engaging in these contemplations, reflections, etc., and the final aspiration, when we finally generate the aspiration from the depths of our hearts, that we will indeed strive and undertake all efforts for the benefit of others so that they attain liberation as well. When we've done this, this is we will have generated bodhicitta.
Teni karte ngarang rang chikpote ngarang tharathu go di tolangem batsun shege yen samni teni samna teni thakba mambaze gres thakba chungchong gres teni nge simchin thamche ko tolange babaje go ndu ma to ngarang chikpote tontak chembo mare samni teni ge samlo de nguni jangni ke sona teni nga zote la thakba chembo zene teni se gres.
If we don't have the aspiration to work for the liberation of all beings, rather our aspiration is to achieve our own liberation, then this is an aspiration at the level of the Hinayana tradition. If we are able to genuinely arouse the aspiration, however, to work for the liberation of all beings in addition to ourselves, then this is the aspiration of the Mahayana vehicle.
Teni shanship ke sip di gomyati teni ta samlo tangsar mambo yore te nga so boba ge chulu ke nangla yopan ra ho tan zambalang ke chulu gang nangla yo mandik ze nga so bo ke chu nangla ti shanship ke sim gomsar te la hal lepa mambo yore ze gyachimbo gona chimbo yore yo tab debo chongchong gona chongchong yore yo ram mambo re te nga so sama 보바가 출라 대체 차기 용건 참아가 하고 그래지 맞서 정타 수수 나라 배나 영마 옛날에 사자 옛날 게르게나 참아식 바래 수수 레지가 나라 되니 샹심 그 셈고 되니 검탑대 할 리바 망본도스.
And it's in respect of meditational techniques and practices on bodhicitta, or in respect of cultivating bodhicitta, that the Tibetan tradition has a great wealth. anyone with some familiarity of the Tibetan Buddhist tradition will know that meditations on bodhicitta, from very straightforward, simple and abbreviated practices to those that are longer and more complex, are present in all of the different lineages and schools, including the Nyingma, the Guluk, etc.
Teni ti kapsa nga tsu gomya ga zoti ti nga tsu shanship ku sem gom go res yenang te tang nyamde teni nga tsu ngonro mbumnga zine teni jamdo da teni semkiti ti na shanship ku sem na ti kar cheshu de re teni mandar da teni dorsim gomle da teni lami namjur zine to so nga bo de go re ti na ne kar cheshu ti teni shanship ku sem gomya de res.
So this is the second step on the way. In addition to meditating on bodhicitta, we also need to engage in the accumulations of the 5 preliminary practices. However, of the 5 preliminary practices, the most important thing is the cultivation of bodhicitta.
Mbumnga zeyata, teni ngonro lordong namshe gomlik te, teni boba ka chuwa, teni korang ka tsogo, teni nyamlim shee ligz re ma tokpa, te nga tsu zhambaga nangla mendukse, yenang pe na gya ka chuwa nangla yenang, mangchi shusu nga tsu boba ta chikba re, te na nga tsu ngimjong gya ka chuwa yang go re, shangchib ko semde yami gya ka chuwa nangla mambu shee yo re, te go re, nga tsu tsama ka teni go re ze, yenang te tabshi, gum nyamlim shee ya ka teni tabshin ra woto, 보바가 추구나라 망보레 디토라 가서 ngonro tummon고 ngonro 지지한다다 되니 tummo 마인비 ngonro 나지한다고 또 수상마 보고 추구 샬릭 렌두스 이나 동고 돈이 사마직 바레스.
So the preliminary practices, the 4 common preliminaries and the 5 uncommon preliminaries, these are special to the Tibetan tradition. However, the goals they are oriented to achieving are common to other Buddhist traditions, such as the Chinese Buddhist tradition. The Chinese tradition too emphasizes the cultivation of bodhicitta, the cultivation of renunciation. However, in respect of concrete practices, the Tibetan tradition has a great wealth, including the preliminary practices.
당아서 되네 저니 곰나 약보레스 저니 te ngazo shepta ngazo boba chu na la jani gomya hal liba mambo yore sanga kana la mambo ndu teni ngazo yami chu na la haliba mambo yore teni ngazo de loshoko nyantu chu na la yo be mambo ndu de gang gomna parche manche wa de chikshu chikba ra bore gangstar ngazo teni jani gomne de sim jewa yakbo yongya chetani jani gomgore samtang gomgores.
So having completed the preliminary practices, we then move on to the practice of shamatha meditation. There are many different shamatha meditation techniques in the Vajrayana tradition, as well as in the Chinese Buddhist tradition, and also in the Theravadan tradition as well. The overall goal of shamatha meditation is to be able to develop the capacity to bring our minds into a state of calmness.
Tani tati gum japchani jirni de yakbo japchabi jini tani dagaso dag zogba chimbo gumna da yakbo reze ngaso jirni yakbo gum charti didi parchi ngaso khangba na sak dumba gyapa gba tinji la lep char songse te ngaso ra ngondo ngimjong gum char tani shangje ko sema gum char tani jirni gum char na da ngaso sak gyapa gba tinji la lep yore tani sak gyapa gba par drone tani yaran drona tal namsang
So it's after we have established a firm foundation in shamatha practice that we are ready to begin studying and practicing the Dzogchen teachings. When we have completed our training in shamatha meditation, we can consider ourselves to have reached perhaps the 7th or 8th level of the building. And having reached this level, it's now relatively easy for us to get in the elevator and go quickly up to the higher levels.
Teni Kangbatsak Gaba Tony Jipati Kangrezina, Teni Tumbani Kiton Tokbati Resi, Teni Zobachimbo in Nandra, Temai Bangas of Shagachimbo in Nandra, Yamana Pena Yame, Teni the Chunani, Teni Konso, Teni Chanzong Zigri, Tini the Nala Gumjavlita, Sem Gotini, Nilik Yaputoya, Yabu Mambo or the so Kangi Nachibari, or Tenita Jima, Tenita, Tombani Kiton Togore, the Tamadres.
So, having reached the 9th level of the building, what our goal now is, or our task is, to realize the nature of emptiness. And this is something we can do through different practices, the Dzogchen teachings, the Mahamudra teachings, or in the Chinese tradition, the teachings of Chan. All of these are very good techniques or practices we can use to gain a realization of the nature of emptiness.
Tini teso tangazo ji zongka pa gteni langzu namba samganala sombi teni ngimjong da shangship ko semda toni ki tawazini sumbo tere teso ramba jende nyamlin che go res.
So these things, these three things, the cultivation of renunciation, bodhicitta, and developing a correct view of emptiness, were described by Tsongkhapa in his 3 principal aspects of the path.
Teni tenji ge nyamlin shi cherte tenga zo tirub ni shachik bayenari ni shachani bayenari tirub samji bayenari jibji bayenari namina tema to jamba go mari jamba yo mari te tenji shini nyamlin che go res.
And this course, or this path of practice, is one that works for us in the 21st century, the 22nd century, the 30th century, the 40th century, regardless of where we are or when we are. This is a good path of progress.
Oh yeah. Teni tenji ti gom nyamlin shi cherte pena nga zo boba chonda hoina kandi samgrezna aso marcha pomo cho to chi lama cho gom yanda wo tenji zula njokore nga zo boba cho marcha pomo chi manando yanda ta kora jawanda wo tenji rawo res samni tenji samgo yari re tenji marese nga zo te nga zo norwa rendeuze teni marcha pomo yenare teni sidang se yena teni nga zo teni gom gyap go re gyap chokoreze gom gyap maggo kinga mchigyo marese nga sama gyap go re teni lama so gom gyap dena teni nga so marcha pomo gom marjibna lama so sangje sona teni nga so marcha pomo sangje ro re ro marese lama so karan so sangje sona ngaran so korwa na la taro de go rese teni indi susu rang gom gyaweti karchim bore sama gom gyap go re sama lojong she go rese.
So in respect of meditating in this way and studying in this way, many Tibetans feel that this is essentially the task of lamas and ordained people. It's not, in fact, it's not suitable or appropriate for lay people, but in actual fact this isn't the case. It isn't the case that lamas attain Buddhahood while lay people stay stuck in samsara. Everybody alike needs to study and practice the Dharma, to meditate.
당아서 대랑 네 되는 가서 금겨야 샬릭티 대지직 되는 누르디 나오시니 되니 고든 누르디 반라보레 이나한테 가팅 가서 지마 금나 되니 다조 름베 로종시니 치리 로종시 되니 치리 금니 되니 로고레 마토 망아서 대랑 샤반디 탑 데포즈크 용고 마레 따로 참마 갈레시니 치리 름바진데 되니 로종시 되니 로종시 차이 지스 되니 금겹 냠린시 되니 로나 되니 소소 마치 첸달라양 데모케 보용야 쳔시마라양 데모케 보용야 tindizi yungres.
So tonight I've just really outlined the path of meditation in very broad brushstrokes. In actual fact, the path of meditation needs to be taken step by step, gradually, with the appropriate study and practice going hand in hand. And if everyone practices like this, then it is certainly the case that you will attain great happiness in this life and future lives.
다 somebody 강레지나 가서 대랑샤피 타와지 되니 곰바지 되니 쇼바리 다 somebody 쇼바리지 되니 쇼바디 가리레지나 셔당 쇼발라 가서 mambo요레 mam보 나니 네 대랑샤파디 가서 8월 뜻심바 즉 나니 되니 젬바 어디 거르더니 가서 냠림 시기를 같이 버린도지 디름니 시자지 반디나라 캬버드 대가르침 버린도지.
So, having addressed the view and meditation, we now move on to conduct or action. And in respect of this, in light of us being in the 21st century, I would like to talk about the 6 perfections, but particularly the first, the perfection of generosity.
Tani jimba jiorzi, ngazu jimba tela gazi orzi jimbala jiorzi.
We divide the generosity or the practice of generosity into 4 types of generosity.
Tani jimba jignani tangbodi kanrizina tangbodi ngazu pena mo warwonda oda yana tani pena ji ta lhomma na lhomal hobtana la joya ga tani lhoyum me panrao yana tani ji napa mangkhang la tani ta ton kan tani mayu me pa Tapena Australia Jacob Tinda Poena, Jung Tujung Tini Mambola Japshire Yosari Tindi Macho Yona Mena Meshite Cantaran, Zambalana Macho, Namio Yori, Shibu Nacho Yori, Samashipo Tatarin Romare. Tindi Indi or Tindigo Motosola Tini Tangaso Tini Susu Nipa Kanyokotoni Tini Robachiata Yang, Penazo Sacha Dela Yenada Tini, Sacha Jambala Yenada Tindi Caps, Pena Ramshon Kamgotini Nopa. or sayum gyab yinra oda chalo yongada teni go nopa shona teni ti kaps so teni kavli te pena general longshot teni gormo teni yona teni perke yana so kavli gyabya gantar ti thola teni ta ngaso shigyab go rezi ti thola pena ishulugi na pe yabo rezi koso ishulugi teni mambo ti thola leka mambo legendu Tini ngazu nangba yinda ngazu zhunga nala mambo mambo sheyore, tini gozi ne haliba mambo sheyore. Rete ngazu lalinga toni de yabu yunga menduzi.
So the first kind of generosity is material generosity to those who are in difficult or unfortunate situations, such as students who are not able to afford their student fees, or ill people, destitute people, victims of natural disasters, etc., lending material assistance to them. This is something that in fact the Christian tradition is very strong in and has done very well in respect of, despite the fact that the Buddhist scriptures in fact constantly urge the need for generosity and material giving. This is perhaps one area in which the Buddhist tradition has not implemented its teachings as well as it could have.
Koso pena ju gormo tsu tini yongken tsu tini ga su sokotola ji lobdala te ro kyorshia mankhang jawyanda ta lobda jawyanda ta tini yana te mo gargila tini rokshianda o mo tini to worula rokshianda o dorna kantar ngubo toni tini to shusola tini japshi ya ti tola pe thonchimshi gore te santi ngamani mambo sondukta ina ga so lagling ya boyong mandukta teribni chachpan din nala the halipa karchimbo nekabs rendozi te gogorezi ngasu nipa kanyo natin is gogorezi nipa tantni.
So in the 21st century it's extremely important that Buddhists, in accordance with their capacity, according to their abilities and their means, find ways to materially benefit students by building schools, assisting in hospitals, old people, poor people.
Teni tonda nipati ngasu jempa nipati karazina teni semchin sola teni manjik pa jina machak pa jempa zire bena ngasu moyin nanda teni tendro yin nanda teni koso bena ji semgo tolan jikchak mambo yonggo nanda yana libo tolan jikchak mambo yonggo nanda bena ngasu da mojik teni mo tola teni yona yana teni tendro tola yona koso sokjawya mi sokjawya ta tendro sokjawya ta o teni bena tsore bena mankanga nala yo pi napa ga sokjamnanda te maim bi teni ta ngasu ramshung kamgo jikpa shong ine kamna teni tela ropa chini muso sokjamnanda ganster 고소되니 쪽잡야 될라제 그랬대 할리바갈 침보란 조거리 젬바 니바티 데레 티톨라가 소식잡고 그랬어.
The second form of generosity is the generosity of, or the giving of fearlessness, and this refers to the saving of life, the rescuing of a person or a being that is facing the great fear of or danger of losing their life. So whether this be saving the life of an ill person in hospital or a person whose life is in danger in society, this is one area in which we should make strong effort.
Teni jemba sambade kangrezena teni ngacho teni chuji jemba zegreta te ngacho haliba ga teni ngacho nangba yenna te ngacho teni je chachu ngomate tereze teni ngacho chu jemba jinze zeate kangrezena ngacho chu toni teni bar chuchushandanra wangkarnanda gangena te remba meba gogorte la remba linnan dik marize te la meba gogorze pe ngacho khangban den dizga nala chushanna khangba tela teni ko lachatra gona tepe na ngacho terang mrere ngacho gormote zdeni khambandala lachani teni tinala ngacho teni chutu shajana te mndukba mndukse te mayimbi goni teni ngacho lacha mambolna yata so tsawan nduk mari te so chudang garwa rezi chama rumba mepa da la mepa goni teni parjin go rezi tela chuji jimba ze rezi.
The third kind of generosity is generosity in giving the Dharma. And this is in fact the key characteristic of the Buddhist tradition, generosity in respect of providing the Dharma to others. So this means that when we are giving teachings or giving empowerments, etc., this should definitely be done on a no-fee basis. We should not accept any money in exchange for providing the Dharma to others. So even though it might be necessary for us to pool money in order to have, in order to pay for the rent of a space, for example, this is okay. However, beyond this, there is no justification for accepting payment for the Dharma. In fact, this is completely in contradiction of the Buddhist teachings.
Teni ngacho chude parapteni rimba meba ga thone mavjin dela rimba mambolen lacha mambolen teni zena teni shina teni chuji jimba ze mare teni chu chong japa chu chongwa ze gres.
So if we don't provide the Dharma for free, in fact if we use it in order to generate money, then this is not generosity of the Dharma. This is doing business with the Dharma, commodifying the Dharma.
Teni tiram nishi tsakshik bandi la ngone chane chuji jimbazi kita pay karchimbo haleba karchimbo re ngaso gormu mambo ta pena ngaso nangba cho inna teni gormu mambo yosa teni te nyonyong rendo ze te na teni gormu mambo jinje te nyonyong ishi chulung ra o teni gormu mambo ngaso nangba la menduk ze yona ya dele kyang karti karchi shuti ngaso teni tiram nishi tsakshik ba na la dele kyang karchi wa teni chu jimba te rendo ze.
In the 21st century, the giving of the Dharma is extremely important. So whether or not Buddhists have a lot of money to contribute in material ways, really the most important thing beyond material giving is the giving of the Dharma, making opportunities to hear and learn the Dharma available to others.
Teni perrangaso tirap jorgit jergo chibdin tso korla teni mambola pamjori argi maso ikabre ti kapsena teni ngubo jembate yang halepa karchimbores.
During previous centuries, the 18th and 19th centuries, these were times when society was developing and people didn't have a lot of material well-being. It was during this time, or during these times, giving material things was appropriate.
Teni ngacho perna ngeitana pena ngacho nshokla samlo tangpa na pamjur ko toni nshokla teni yargireze halepa shikboreze ngubo toni rete semkam ko toni halepa kyuboreze shibo mare gorboreze.
The way I see it in the West, society is extremely materially affluent, is extremely well off. However, in terms of the spirit, people are very poor, very impoverished.
Teni ngacho ngama yenna gelezina tsha ya gelezina ka yige yungju ni pote ngacho sharna teni chama ho gormo khene mo jambala jamba teni la go goreze ngama yenna geleze jana teni tsamaga lamsang o geleze na ngacho rokyurshia teni gormo rokyurshia zaje konji teni rokyurshia teni zla kongoreze ngamaina teni tartate mareze geleze la teni ngacho ngupo otone teni jambala rokyurshini teni geleze gyores te maiba ngacho semkum go tola semkum go oroyen kamambo yore ngupope mambo kochu shikpo halipa shikbore yena semkum go tola halipa kyobo oro teni yore tsola teni ngacho tambi chushani gumlabni teni shina kochu sem go toni dungor mendro oreze te teyang geleres.
The notion of charity that we have been accustomed to is one where we give money and material things to people to alleviate their suffering. However, really, our new understanding of charity should be giving, the giving of the Dharma and giving relief to people in terms of their mental and psychological suffering. There are a lot of people who have great material means, however, in terms of their spiritual resources, they're extremely impoverished. So by teaching them about the Dharma, teaching them about meditation, this is a way of bringing them relief from their suffering. And this is a new understanding we should bring to the idea of charity.
너소 때니 가서 때니 때 mambo sem거 나라요 비 능머때 오늘 전에 카요 라요 거 파르더니 더 매바시 탑 그래지 때니 코란서 못에서 코란서 남발라 타파 용큰이나 초코리 남발라 타파 맹큰이나 초코리 야나 코란 20바이나 카시이나 강이나 초코리 야나 코란 추식라 타파 머신 그 못든지기나 때는 난 그래요 말에 강터 코스 sem거 나라 능머페 mambo도 때나 때니 가서 nangba teni tabshi te sola teni teni koran sola ko ngazu nangba tapa shina ndukre ma shina ndukre kantar ngazu teni tela roba shini teni gumlab teni samba zang opena shamdang nyarji yakbo gumya teni ngazu te pena jirni gum gyabya teso parlabna teni motsama teni semganala dumur mepa chakreze.
So in terms of those that we share the teachings of the Dharma with, it doesn't matter whether or not they have faith in Buddhism, whether they're Buddhists or not, or whether they are people with no religious faith, no Buddhist faith or not. All people are able to be benefited from the Buddhist teachings. The Buddhist teachings are something that are absolutely capable of eliminating people's mental suffering. And so anyone is a viable recipient for our generosity in this regard. So by sharing with them knowledge of how to meditate on compassion, shamatha meditation, etc. This is a way that we can show true generosity to people by helping them reduce or eliminate their suffering.
Tani ngaso semnang ga dungmur ziyate halepa ga dungmur chembo rezim. Ngaso zaji me gyonji me na tani ngaso motso tani soso sune zaji tani sarji da gyonji tsar soso batsun sheya mato danga zaji mand nga rang chokcha ke tani zenkin yo mareze soso zaji me na soso kabli gyab tani soso batsun she tani re semtok ko dungmur ti mambo yona tani mambo rang chokcha ke ndwaze tani yena te semtok ko dungmur ti tarong ngaso zaji me pa ta gyonji me pa lekyang ngaso ngupu me pa lekyang dungmur semtok ko dungmur ti dungmur chembo reze ngaso pena wangcha me na semgunala wancha menken go moso semgunala demo kebo yung kan yores sandang nyanjak mena ngaso nyanjak menken go moso semnala demo kebo yung kan mamborese teni ngupo ge halang hajang go shikbo mayna ngaso orwo so nala semgunala demo kebo yung kan mamborese ta semtokni yakbozo mandrna semgunala yakbozo mena teni ta ngaso choa kirtab mandugze teni mambo orang chok chagand wazim aya teni tela ngaso nangba teni chude ngune tane kosola kayogla pamba yore teni ngaso chunda kosola jingo ore ngaso 총잡야 말에 kosola jingo oreze teni koso sri oni rewa chaya ta teni go ma ngaso paranrone teni kosola chiri la te pantaya te ngaranso lengre te hago go oreze.
So mental suffering is the most extreme form of suffering that we can endure. Physical suffering, not having enough to eat, etc. Not having enough to eat, well, we can engage in, make great efforts and do what we need to in order to get food. You won't find people committing suicide just for the reason that they're hungry. Similarly, it's possible to live a relatively happy life without status or fame or money necessarily. However, when one truly is afflicted by mental suffering, this is a state that drives many people to end their lives. So it is by sharing with people the Buddhist teachings, teachings which have the potential to enable them to address and resolve their suffering, that we are delivering the greatest benefit, and we need to understand that this is our basic responsibility.
Teni semnangla dinguryo tsarna, teni nga tso sacha yakboyo na pantok mandugzi, gyumangboyo na pantok chichim mandugzi. Bena America, San Francisco, teni zamba chimbo titola, teni nga tso zambolang gamo tsama, teni tamota sanroya, sacha yakbo teni la tsini tsama tamota sarezi, reti mambo titola soni rangchok chakanda wazi. Te sacha yakboyo na pangamando. Teni kyoransi Australia la, tsokala, teni chakthumboyo sa titola, teni nga tso roni tana, 할리바가 열중 약보른도와 되니 할리바가 배 잠수 약본도 되니 사차 약본도 된지지 레데 뭐망보 티차닌도네 양마르 랑쪽자네 친앙라 찜니 된지제근도와 셈낭라 등머리요 차르나 되니 사차 약보요 나 판통만도 되니 자지 망보요 나 판통만도 고야 약보요 나 판통만도 디 셈근난가가서 등머르테 되니 추고니 탁제 마시나데 탁제 시템 탑지 잠바 만도세.
So once when a person is afflicted by mental suffering, then having things like money or status or fame really are no help whatsoever. It's like the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. It's a wonderful sightseeing place. It's a wonderful sight to behold. However, there are many people who go there, and despite the beauty of the place, they go there to commit suicide. There's also a place that I visited in Sydney, a cliff on the shoreline, which is extremely beautiful, but I hear that many people, in fact, take their lives there. So really, mental suffering is something that is extremely serious, and it is something that the teachings, the Dharma, only is able to solve. Other external things we might have are not capable of addressing this suffering.
Teni te ngazu nangbala ngazula ngubu mamboda ji mambo menayo te kyong marje ngazu te chut kosola jinna te pantokondo se bena ngazu zaji menken kemla zaya jinjana te korangla pantong dogorezi semnangla dungri yongken kemla teni semgnala dungun mepashiya ga teni tapshi te korangla labna teni kosola teni pantong dogoyore teni ti thokla te ngazu nangba teni 지 차추 뭐만 가서 남발라 띠띠 꼴라 가서 할레바 식보래서 가서 답시 할레바 빼 망보여래서 띠 답시도 좋고 졸라야 볼랍 때 고솔랍진나 띠메 망보라 판통도래 메 망보고 소자고 말이 메 망보고 되니 뭐세 고소거더니 대체당 담바든지 제나 초거리 뭐세 런탕당 담바든지 되니 제나 초거리 띠돌라 띵아서 삼로 망보당 고군도서 가서 남바서 소소랑 나랑 그 곰잡니 데데나 틴트 금문도서 나랑 그 곰잡고 그래 레딩아서 소소랑 그 곰잡 되는아서 곰잡야 돼 모잠바 솔라 파리약 보페 어 딘디치야데 베가르친 보리지 띵아서 시속라 잡시 치슈티 데리지 가서 디름니시 짜식 바나라 무소오더니 등을 치슈티 셈는 그 등을 해지 어야 되니 디 셈는 그 등을 매발지야 돼 가서 남바데 되니 지다 탑시 빼 망보여 그러지 가서 남바데 되니 티톨라 탑시 할리바 망보 용컨도 가서 남바래지 근데 되니 가서 티톨라 식잡 나 되니 망볼라 판토콘도 시속라 잡시 약보용 그러지.
So if we don't have, as Buddhists, we don't have much money to benefit people materially, this is okay. It's really the thing that the Buddhist tradition is extremely wealthy in is the teachings, the teachings of the Dharma. These are what are able to bring people who are suffering mental affliction great relief. And it's in teaching people about the Dharma, providing them with ways to address and resolve their own suffering, that we will be doing them the greatest service we can. So even though it's necessary for us to, of course, engage in our own meditation, progress in our own practice, working solely for ourselves is not okay. We need to definitely be willing to share the Dharma with others and benefit them in ways that will help them alleviate their mental suffering. And through doing this, we will be really doing the best thing we can. People won't need to commit suicide. They'll be able to live lives of happiness and meaning. And this is essentially the key contribution that we as Buddhists can make in the 21st century.
Tani tab jimba jibad tani tamade kangrezina tani ngaso mo jamba nala shamda nyangji jimba zigrezi ngaso mo tamchila gawa jimba zodo shambi jimba zigre shambi jimba shamba zigito mo tamchi pola nyang zewa tela zigre te mo tamjo ngaso ina pena ngarang zo namgin de suso pada mala ngaso nyang zewa yores denja waso ngaso suso budang bomola tini ngaso nyang zewa re tani suso da 냠도 용킨 그 겸상직 보다다 예산다 대종 아주 대지 냠제와 요래 때마도 뭐 잠발랑 아주 냠제 문두지 이래때 아주 낭바가 내가 알아 졸라더니 뭐 참말라 되는 아주 단 잠님 차버싸네 매바든지 고즈나 대지 가보요래 이래때 옛날 아주 뭐 참말라 되니 바람 잠님 그거니 되니 아주 정말 뭐 참말라 가와라 로종식 아주 뭐 참말라 가고 그러지 Rete ngaso lobjongshi jandr machine ngaso masamala gatab kumare ngarang ga phamala gare ngarang ga pomola gare mato jambala gagmare rete ngaso lobjongshi na jondr china teni ngaso simchen samala ga dendi yongtab garezi.
So the fourth kind of generosity is the generosity in giving love or loving kindness. And this involves us extending love and loving kindness to all beings without distinction. So whilst it's generally easy for us to feel love towards our own parents, our own children, our own relatives, our own family members, it's difficult, more difficult for us to extend that feeling without exception to all other beings. So it's for this reason that we need to work on training in generating this love and kindness towards others without working on cultivating this quality through meditation, through our own practice, then it would be difficult.
Teni ngaso gerk ngaso namgin ngaso shamda nyarji te yapo gumgo gorezi te gumthabta ngaso bobaga chugunala pe mambond gumgo gore kate sham nyarji susu rang yapo gumna pe na ngaso do kablen sithe ko do kablen ina pe na korang la nipa tendis do ti nala yo na chak thamje po korang tenshik gorezi yana pe na ngaso sa golala teni tenshik dowa tendra bore mo korang nyarji gumden kan ko matela teni koranga mati nyenkor tela teni korang nipa tendi khabarwa tendi yore masudang sina mate tang nyamta khabdashina teni nyamta dena nyamta lehkalena teni korang rangshik mochama semkanala kyubo semkanala demo tendi rendo gorese nyaji gongkang masgena.
So in respect of this, it's very important that we work on our own cultivation of loving kindness. Practitioners of loving kindness, people who practice this, who are successful in their practice, generate almost a magnetic force. So just as a magnet attracts other metallic objects to it, or almost the energy force that the earth possesses itself, a person who has cultivated has cultivated loving kindness to an advanced level finds that in their dealings with other people, in the way they speak to them, the way they interact with them, they are able to naturally bring them benefit, to bring them relief from their negative states of mind.
Teni ngacho tarta zambolongo sacha kangla ina teri zongkir chimbo mo mambo yosa teni lerka mambo jera hajang chimbo yosa teni teso nala chowa noshik chimbo yosa teso muteso samshik ngola teni nzim yo marezi nzim zina muteso ngon nakbori namjin mo nakbo mo tang mo thigna ngon nakbo shini ro ma to ba teni gayanda ta teni nzim je teni yo marezi teni yendi ta ngacho shamba jimbazi shamba ligile shambi ngakale shambi semgile zene teni shaki yore shambi ligile zeyate kanezena teni ngaso mochi tiksona ya teni kola teni chi par nzimtoya ugaya teni chi na kapsa pe panto yore pe na mochi ke semganala ko semdigni teni ro devi kapsa teni mochi ke khorang ngola tani uganne ngo yakbozo tonsona te koran lamsan semganala kibor chagne nyama chiktela ko sem kibo changro ya teni yores.
So in respect of the generous giving of loving kindness, we can do this using our body, our speech, and our mind. So, for example, using our bodies in a big crowded city in the world, simply by smiling at another person, this is a way that we can extend generosity to them. Having smiled at them, they will find themselves feeling happy for the rest of the day. So this is one form of generosity.
Tani shambi tani ligilere tani ngakalezene tani ngaso mojamba nyamde tksona tani kaja yakboshaya kaja yakbote semgo nangni shego goreze khachi bogosha nanjo mare semgo nani korangla pantoyada tani kaja shana tani modela yang pe panton jore pena semdigni tani ro denkenzena kaja yakbonda tani chorsona te korang nyamachik bola semya borenjo andata teni nyama tambula tendiri sona teni nyama nipa da sambagana la sosorang gandang jamne o kale pena ko yakborenjo tendi yore karti te menna nyamachik potela korang dang yakbo maphona teni nipa la chirdik sone teni korang rangchok chayanda teni nyenka yore te na kap nga zo moschik ngola tane chi gajjana yana ko moschik la kaja yakbo zu shajana ti moschik teni stokchum do yana teni yongores.
And in terms of the giving or generosity of speech, when we speak to people, if we speak to them sincerely from our hearts and not simply make superficial utterances, it's possible that we can give really significant and lasting benefit to others, in addition to making them feel happy for the rest of their day. In subsequent days, the day after that, reflecting over the words that we have spoken to them, they will, it's possible they will gain continued benefit. It may even be that words we speak to a person will prevent them from doing something like taking their own lives. So actually generosity of speech can even be a way that we rescue other people.
Then it's all the same reason. Same ganala mena ngaso kaja yakbosha na zimbares. semganala mena nga zumto na ya ta te khachik te zga gare ma to semganani ga ma ti mala phantogoma re zo semganani ya bogo re semganani nyarje ta nyangchi wa ya bogom go re.
However, the key form of generosity, or our generosity, really originates in our minds. Even though we may smile at someone or we might speak nice words to them, ultimately without the pure intention at the level of our minds, then these things will be just superficial. So it's for this reason that it's extremely important that we meditate on loving kindness and that we practice generosity in respect of loving kindness at the level of our minds.
Teni sem gotone ngaso mojambala teni shamsi te yakbogum go re ngaso sem ganala ngone tane sem ga tangla shamsi yona teni ngaso muk mojala tana te jamba ngarang muk nala tana o khorang ngala shamsi yakboshi gundu sambade ha gondro re ko sona teni khorang ga sem ganala ya gabu changro re khorang sem digni teni ro yo kapsa mojamba chi ngaso ngotawani machine kan teni moyena khorang la kajafia teni khorang ga nyamde dene kaja chingni zu shatni korang sem tangni korang ga shamtsi rawo goni kaja khashi shajna te korang ga sem ganani dungwate menjo gore te mesona tani korang ga dang jamni tani korang ga leka kare le guna ya kir korang ga leka ya boleni ndore korang tani chnangla chewyanda da zamba ga thoni chewyanda da to sheg mare te na ga so sam nyangji yakbo jelab gombate tani jimba chama ganani chishu de tereze pena machik sem dungni ro de ona te ngaran chu ti khola tani ta gormo tini ta ji tongchak chik ta ji gyanda tini jinna te pantogyo mare korang gormo mepi sem dugba mare je tani ti pantogyo mare zo ti korang la sem gotoni shamsi goni kajashaya 샴제가 먹고 콜라 따야 되니 샴제가 고니 좀동야 디 콜라 판조 그래 디 콜라 안 잡았다 그래서 가서 배나 낫 나위 값을 되니 만 통나 디 람성 장정도 대당 직반라고 그래서.
So it's really very important that we meditate on loving kindness, because it's through doing so that people, when they speak to us, will be able to know by looking in our eyes that we are speaking from a point of view of a person who is with loving kindness. And this is really what people who are suffering mental affliction are in need of. They're not in need of being given money. They're in need of being looked on with eyes of loving kindness, of hearing words imbued with loving kindness. And this is something that will give them great benefit and prevent them perhaps from taking extreme measures in their own lives.
깝깝스 코랑 할리바 뚝침보리지 코랑 냥 뚝침보 코랑 식침보리지 깝깝스 가서 뭐 셈제한테 할리바 냠충레지 배 냠충레지.
The human mind is something that at times can be extremely strong, extremely robust, and at other times can be extremely weak.
되니 머스치가 나랑라 되니 쉐송제 코니마치글라 되니 셈드니 코랑 그 샤와치 약보 마용네 셈드니 되니 할리바 셈 큐니 되니시네 디 촘그나라 람낭란조 되게요세 람낭란조 되게요디 되니 뭐 참에 받더니 참에 큰저 되니 뭐 코니 코셈 땅니 갓송제 갓네 콜라치 땅니 대랑아 소시 디 가반더 되니 말 코셈 땅니 지 가보라 보쇼니 머스치가 코랑 거 몰라다니 코시 갓송제 맞대 맞대 뭐시가 말해 때 맞대 지 가파레 마토 잠바치 가자지지셔요 말이 지지셔요 말 때고 람상 셈가나라 깨보착송 코랑 거 등머 때 매바레 송제 때니 코랑 거 얘나 뭐 남긴 뭐 가시든 뭐 딱바로 가니 든지 등큰 거 뭐요래 뭐 가시든 뭐 낙보시네 등큰도와 때니 코랑 거잖아 때고니 뭐 남긴 가니 되는 돈 등큰 거뭐 떠서 뭐니 딘지 그 값은 뭐 떠서담 찾나 판독 전부 연구 요사르지 그 딘지 샤송아 띠리 대고 말에 코랑 것도 된 말에 가서 미셈디 할레바 냠충충으로 할레바 냠충으로 셈 멋진니 때 멋지 비값스 되니 가서 멋지가 나라 짐슨 메나 나라시 따니치 야보이치 가소나 내가 셈 나라 장조 그래 돼 레라보레 내가 저 딘디시고 그래서 뭐 소소라 가서 로종시니 되니 미 되니 잠발라 가자야 보셔야 되니 잠발라 되니 셈그 토네 되니 또 참말라 샴지 약보고야 어때 가서 로종 시고 그래서 내가 저 시속라 딘디시나 되니 뭐 망볼라 가서 반도고래 시속라 반도고래 내가 저 낭바가 되니 차추 지시슈지 데레즈.
One person told me that they one day were feeling extremely glum and gloomy, not having had much luck in whatever actions they were undertaking, and then went out into the street and a complete stranger, somebody they didn't know from a bar of soap, smiled at them, and being smiled at by this person filled their heart with much joy and enabled them to overcome their negative feelings immediately. And in fact, it does work like this. The human mind is something that's extremely weak. It's something, however, though, that can be that means when a negative mood, a bad mood, can be also cured very quickly. Simply a smile from another person or some sympathetic or compassionate words can be enough to help us overcome our negative emotional state immediately. So this is something that we as Buddhists need to really need to practice, using with love and compassion in the words we utter and the actions we undertake. This is something that is a characteristic of the Buddhist tradition, and it's something we need to place importance on.
되니 가서 무잘라 되니 로바체나 되니 가서 고르모 딱딱다 되니 티 응우부 딱딱 로바체 고레세 때메나 알아 로바체요 말에 되니 삼나 때 삼로 되 가서 노라레지 에캅캅서 가서 되니 응우부 할레 바카 치위까요 어리지 베나 무스치글라 고랑라 자지메니 먹이시 되니 요나 말아서 고랑 운이터니 고야티 되니 자마리 마토 자마메나 가서 샤냐지요나 고랑 겹톱고 말에 깝깝스 틴지르지 레티 남긴 Teni ngazo semganala shamnyangji yo teni teni soso niba kandiz yo na ti thoni himmatsola teni phamba dramna te ngazo mususo ngazo terang dana yung king mo samaga mo janla phan thokre ngazo mo janla pha ma thok king mo chijang mare se te ngaran so soso leka te malena thoko mare te lena thokore te na te ngazo go shopare se teni terang shapi tawa tang gomba tang shopa sambote tenrizins.
So even though there are some times when people are really in need of material assistance, in general, our main practice of generosity should be in terms of sharing loving kindness and compassion with others through our actions. There is nobody that won't be benefited through these actions. So this relates to our conduct. So now we have covered view, meditation practice, and conduct.
Tani jamba jia mesi tani sama ya bonyan song tiji che tani nga zo tarong karma jinra bo tani zikarang la tani nga zo jwa zhilen shine tani nga zo samlo jiri shine ndik sares.
Dedication of merit.
Jega non jega,